Okay, and we're unlocked and live on YouTube. Okay, so Corey and Edith, just let me know when the applicants are in the meeting.
We're just still waiting on a couple. The primary presenter is available, so I think we can start.
Okay, great. Okay, welcome back to the afternoon session of the Landmarks Preservation Commission's public hearing of February 9th, 2021. We are going to resume the afternoon session with item number 3 on the hearing agenda. And if you would like to participate in any of our hearing items this afternoon, please join the Zoom meeting at the estimated time that is shown on our agenda, which can be found on our website. And with that, I'll turn it over to Corey Harala to take us through the afternoon session.
Thank you, Sarah. We'll begin with public hearing item number 3, LPC 21-03460, an application for a certificate of a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 497, Lot 1, 536 to 538 Broadway in the Soho-Cast Iron Historic District. This is a store building designed by Delamos and Cords and built in 1901 to 02. The application is to replace storefront infill.
Commissioners, the applicants have joined the hearing. You do now have control of the presentation. Just remember to unmute yourself and state your name for the record. You may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Carroll and members of the Commission. My name is Harris Smith with Crown Architecture. I am the applicant for today's proposal. Our application today is to remove non-original doors, transom, and intercom and replace with new black metal frame glass doors and transom, and to install a new intercom and stone threshold at the primary office entry of 530 Broadway. 530 Broadway is located at the northeast corner of Spring Street and Broadway in the Soho-Cast Iron District. .530 Broadway, in fact, consists of 3 adjacent properties: 530 Broadway, 532 to 534, and 536 to 538, that were all built around the turn of the century and are limestone and brick. Today, this building is a combined office building with ground floor retail. The presentation today will focus on the northernmost of the 3 buildings at 536 to 538 Broadway, completed in 1902 to the design of local architecture firm Delamos and Cordes. Since their construction, these buildings largely retain much of their original historic fabric. However, in approximately 1961, the glass sidewalk vaults at the entry were removed, and sometime before the 1970s, the original door of the lobby at 536 to 538 was replaced. And this 1970s version was removed and replaced sometime before 2007. We do not have original drawings of the original door, but this historic photo from 1912 shows what appears to be a wood door with decorative transom bar and metal grille in front of the door. The tax photos, unfortunately, are not clear enough to show whether this door remained into the 1930s and 40s, but by the 70s, this door was replaced with a glass and metal door, and it appears the arch transom had been infilled. Here we can see a street view of our building. Unfortunately, scaffolding is currently up. This location right here is the entry in question. And here are the current conditions of the entry door, which are wooden glass, double doors with a tall arched transom. This entry door does not appear to mimic the little we know about the original door from the historic photos regarding detailing. Conditions also include a surface mounted intercom and possible overpaint residue from the original door. Here we can see a plan of our lobby with the proposed new granite slab at the threshold, removing an existing stone threshold and concrete to replace with a new stone threshold. And on this elevation, we can see the existing and proposed with our proposed slightly higher transom than the existing and slightly higher door than the existing. And a section showing the same with our new compact person reader intercom system and a metal portal frame threshold. Here on this slide, we can see what we believe is the shadow of the original transom cornice. Our proposed door is slightly taller than, our proposed door transom is slightly taller than the original, which we can see here with the alignment of the existing stone joints. On this slide, we have an enlarged detail of the construction of our proposed entry. And the jam condition here in large detail showing that we have a very large existing granite, existing intercom mounted directly to the granite. We are proposing to reduce this significantly intercom system to a much smaller, about 3-inch wide by approximately 6 inches tall version located within the proposed metal frame portal. On this slide, we're showing the existing and our proposed rendering with the slightly taller door proportions, which are closer to the original door proportions than the current door design. Similarly proportioned and styled entry doors that lead to building lobbies can be found throughout the district. The closest example to our proposal is located at 584 Broadway, 1 block north. This door is very similar in proportion. This door is approximately 9'8" tall. Our door is 9'6" tall. And we have a little bit thicker proportions with the bottom and top rail. This is approximate, the style on this door is approximately 4 inches. Our proposal is 6. And this bottom rail is approximately 10 inches and ours are 12. Our bottom rail is 12. Another similarly styled and proportioned door is located across the street on Broadway at 555. This door is has a rail of approximately, bottom rail of approximately 12 inches and style of 6 and is about 9 feet tall. Here we've overlaid a rendering within the streetscape of our proposed entry. And this is looking south on Broadway. And here you can see the proposed design more closely relates to the 536 to 538 retail door height at approximately, this door is approximately 10 feet. Another view here looking north of the same streetscape with our proposal. And here we have an enlarged section at the sidewalk showing the new granite slab. And again, the existing design and the proposed design. Our new doors seek to more closely return to the original proportions of the historic door, resulting in taller, slimmer doors than the existing set, and connecting the new lobby interior with the historic context of the Soho-Cast Iron District, taking inspiration from the original metal grille that was installed at the entry. The new doors and transom are proposed to be metal with a black finish. Also to note, after receiving feedback from the community board, we revised the design to increase the thickness of the bottom and top rails and styles of the door, and replaced the proposed vault light entry mat that we were originally envisioning. We've removed that and replaced this with a stone threshold. Thank you, and I'd like to open up for questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions at this time? Okay, we're gonna, I think not, we don't have any questions right now. We might after the public testimony. So let's move to testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And we will begin with anyone who signed up in advance. I'm going to turn it over to Anthony Fabre, our Director of Intergovernmental and Community Affairs, to walk us through the testimony. Anthony?
Thank you, Sarah. We do have two people who signed up to speak. So I will first bring in Kelly Carroll. Kelly, you should be in the meeting. You just have to unmute yourself.
Kelly Carroll, Historic Districts Council. The current proposal further moves this building's ground floor away from its original configuration. The 1912 photo in the application shows a clear architrave, frieze, and cornice element between the doors and transom, and they should be recreated and installed to match the historic evidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. So I also have Mark Bench, who also signed up to speak, and I'm promoting you to panelist now. Mark, you should be in the meeting now.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Carroll and fellow commissioners. This is Mark Bench for and on behalf of the Victorian Society of New York. The Victorian Society of New York finds the applicant's proposal to remove the existing pair of doors in the transom bar and modify the transom window to be appropriate, as the historic photos show that the doors which are now in place are not the original doors. We also find the type of change in material from wood to metal to be appropriate, as buildings of this age and type were sometimes provided with metal doors. However, the design and location of the proposed transom bar don't match what's visible in historic photos. On the left side of board 5, you can see a photo taken in 1912, 10 years after the building was constructed. The photo shows that the edge of the original transom bar, where it meets the left side of the door surround. The transom had a distinctly molded profile. This is shown in an excellent blow-up on board 11, which shows a scar with a matching profile on the right side of the door surround. To more faithfully replicate the original condition, we recommend that the new transom bar be based on the design, proportions, and details of the historic transom bar, and also placed in its original position in the opening to restore the historic proportions of the door and transom. Thank you.
Thank you. We don't have any other signups, and I also don't see anyone else raising their hands to speak. So I think we're good on live testimony.
Okay, thank you. And Rich, do we have any additional written testimony?
We do have a resolution from Manhattan Community Board 2. They recommended denial, saying that the design was not appropriate to the original design of the building.
Okay, all right. I think, did they have specific comments though about the floor threshold and the details, or just that the design isn't appropriate? Okay, because I think the applicant stated that they tried to respond. I'll let the applicant respond to this. I think you said you were responding to the community board's concerns. Maybe you can speak a little bit more about that in depth and how that responds to their concerns, as well as respond to the other testimony you've heard.
Yes, I believe the community board resolution, I don't have it in front of me, but noted specifically that that they did not like our vault-like proposal, and they thought the proportions of the door were too narrow. They did not overall like the design proposal. And as a response, we've updated the design to have thicker sight lines to reduce the thin profiles, and eliminated the cast iron vault light proposal entry mat, which the community board did not think were appropriate. Yes, and our intent is to provide a more contemporary design ultimately.
Okay. All right, commissioners, do we have any final questions? All right. Okay, so let me unmute everybody so that we can close the hearing and begin our discussion. And while I'm doing that, Corey or Edith, can we maybe just go to a streetscape view with the rendering? Okay. All right. And okay, Commissioner Bland, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Gustafson, would you second that motion?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And so the applicants are proposing to remove a non-historic door with a new contemporary door in sort of evoking the proportions of the historic door. And so, you know, this is something that we see all the time. If there is an application to restore the original door, that would be approved at staff level. So doors that are not restoring the original come to the commission, and often on building entries we've allowed for a different design that's not a recreation, but considered the overall proportions and profiles and details. So I think that's maybe where we should focus our discussion. So Commissioner Devonshire, would you like to start this one?
Sure. When I look at this image and I see the rather elaborate, at least well-detailed storefront next door, I'm at a loss to understand why they wouldn't pick up on some of the detailing for this new door. I really I think it's far too bland and an intrusion on this building. I think they need to work with staff to make it a more elaborate entry.
Okay, so work with staff on details to make it more elaborate. Okay, Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I'm sort of in agreement with Commissioner Devonshire. Somehow, I don't know if it's truth in rendering or the way that it's rendered. It's you know, it does seem something is odd about this rendering.
Okay. Okay. But generally agree with Commissioner Devonshire's comments. Okay.
That's
Commissioner
correct.
Bland? Okay.
Well, the color's right. I think I'm still a little unsettled by the proportions. They seem a little elongated to me. And I agree. It's too bland. It needs a little oomph, you know? So,
Okay,
so I'm with Devonshire on that one.
okay. Commissioner Lutfi?
I'm in agreement as well.
Okay, Commissioner Jefferson?
I'm in agreement as well. I think the proportion of the glass is too long. I think the sill should be higher, but it needs a little more robust. I agree with my fellow commissioners.
Okay. And Commissioner Gustafson?
Yeah, I concur.
Commissioner Shamir Barron?
I guess I would agree, but I think that part of the issue with this rendering is that it doesn't represent, I think, the extent to which the door is actually pushed back in the opening, and I think that might be the problem and the reason it reads so kind of in such a plainer way. I mean, anyway, when I look at the other images from the presentation, the door itself seems much further back, and it's not just because of the scaffolding. And I think that if much further back, the kind of the simple nature of what they're proposing wouldn't be as planar or as plain. So, you know, I agree in general, but I'm just wondering if we're not quite right.
Yeah. Okay. And I think it actually is set back. It's just the rendering isn't showing that so well.
Actually, if I could just clarify on that, their proposal is to bring the infill closer to the face of the entrance around. So you're right, Commissioner Shamir Barron, that is a change. And the renderings, I think, are fairly accurate. So it's about half as deep as it is now, I think. Is what
okay. Thank you, Corey. Okay. Commissioner Holford-Smith?
Yeah, I agree with most of the comments that have been said already. I think part of the issue with everyone's concern is the fact that it's completely flat on the exterior of the building, whereas the historic had relief on the exterior, and so does the storefront next to it. So almost as if they should reverse the section and put the depth on the outside. But I think the proportions are also strange. The doors are too tall.
Okay. So as presented, the applicant said that the transom bar is actually closer to the original transom bar based on the evidence on the silhouette on the scarring on the side of the opening. So is it that do you think the transom bar should align exactly with that, or that the proportions of the sill, as Commissioner Jefferson suggested, that if the sill was taller, the proportions of the doors might read better?
I'm looking at page 11, and it looks like they've put the transom bar higher, whereas the original transom bar had had a cornice and a fascia, which is much deeper, which I know they don't want to reproduce, but maybe it's a combination of lowering it and raising the sill. And
the profile, yep, okay. Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, it's just really lost something in the transition. I think actually one of the things was color, because the color really the wood responded very nicely to the decorative features on the building with a warm look. But this is matching, the color is matching the storefront, so that's acceptable. I agree with other commissioners though that the proportions and perhaps some of the detailing, it just really is, and as far as that goes, I guess recession, because all of it is leading it to look very flat and, just odd and undistinguished. It just doesn't seem to, enhance that doorway in the way that it did formerly, so.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
No disagreement. Move the bar down so that it's more relative. The proportions relate better to the original, and introduce not necessarily historical, but elements on the transom bar that add shadow and depth.
Okay. Okay, so I think that everybody is sort of in agreement in terms of the proportions and details, and that we can move, I think, to an approval with modifications to allow them to work that out with the staff. So Commissioner Devonshire, are you comfortable reading the motion and adding the recommendation that they restudy the height of the transom bar, lower the height of the transom bar to align with the historic height, and to restudy the details on the infill
With staff.
and the plane of the stores as well? Yeah.
Well, you just did it. I don't have to do it now.
Maya?
I'm sorry.
Let's say what she said. That's
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
In the matter of PC 21-03460, 536 to 530 Broadway in the Soho-Cast Iron Historic District, an application to replace entrance infill. I recommend approval with some modifications, finding that the work will not eliminate or damage any significant architectural features, that the proposed doors and transom will match the historic infill in terms of depth and placement, sort of, that the cladding at the entrance will be well integrated into the design, helping to provide a substantial frame in keeping with the character of the building, and will only conceal plain masonry set back within the opening. That the infill will be simply designed to feature a composition of elements including paired doors and a transom, which are typical for entrances of buildings of this age and style. That the infill will be compatibly scaled with the masonry entrance around in harmonious presence with the surrounding streetscape, which features doors and transoms of a variety of heights. And the finish of the black and steel and simple detailing of the infill will help to subtly acknowledge its modernity without drawing attention away from the significant architectural features of the building or streetscape. However, the applicant will work with staff to modify the height of the transom of the door and restudy the details and details.
And the plane of the infill.
The plane of the door with respect to the building.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second it.
Thank you. Rich, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron, Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
thank you. Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
and Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Okay, with 11 in favor and none opposed, the motion carries.
Okay, so that's approved with those modifications. Please work with the staff and we'll move on to the next item.
Okay, the next item is number 4, LPC 20-10594, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 448, Lot 45, 321 East 6th Street in the East Village, Lower East Side Historic District. A row house with Greek Revival and Italianate style details built in 1853 and altered in 1897. The application is to replace windows, construct a rooftop addition, install railings, and alter a rear yard addition.
And commissioners, the applicants have joined the hearing. You now have control of the presentation. Please remember to unmute yourself and state your name for the record, and you may begin. If you could just please unmute yourself. If you're trying to say something, we can't hear you.
This is the owner. Alessandra, I think you need to unmute yourself and turn on your camera.
Okay, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yes.
Okay, where do I find the, I just don't see the command to, for the video. It was there before and then it disappeared. Oh, man.
Bottom left, maybe?
I've asked you to start your video, so it should pop up and you just have to hit OK.
Perfect, thank you. I don't know
Yeah.
what happened there.
We can see you now.
Okay, so my name is Alessandra Dini. I'm the architect for this job at 321 East 6th Street, the full renovation of a townhouse built in 1853 and with built full extension in the back at the end of that century. This is a historic photo from 1949 from the tax photos. You can see already here the unique condition of this house, which is in the East Village, Lower East Side Historic District. Here is the building. And you can see here and in this photograph that the unique condition is that one side borders with the lot where this church, which then became a synagogue, was built. And that building was not built to the full extent of the lot. And there's therefore an alleyway of 8 feet between our building and the synagogue, which will have some consequences as I will show you. This is the plan of the building, and you can see here, that's the 8-foot alleyway that allows for some visibility of what happens to the east side of the building. We're planning to build a penthouse on top, and we purposely pulled it back 28 feet from the front so as to be as unobtrusive as possible in the neighborhood. You can see in this section that the sight lines are such that from the front of the house you don't see anything of what we're trying to do. This is the existing elevation, and this is the proposed elevation. Of course, it's a flattened drawing, so this is the penthouse, but that's 28 feet back. But to show you that we are also trying to, we will replace all the windows and there will be wood windows. This let me just say as an aside, this is not a developer's project for a quick flip. This is a house that was bought by my client as a family home. He and his wife have lived in this neighborhood for over 30 years and grown their children in this house. And this house wants to be the hub for their family. It's not a place that will be, flipped and resold. The side facade of the building is a hodgepodge of windows that were opened over the years with no apparent order. There's also some air conditioners that pop out. We're trying to create some order in that mess. And also especially important is to remove this structure that you'll see better in other views. This is like a solarium built of aluminum and glass that has absolutely no place in this neighborhood. And we would like to fill that in. In here, you can see the extension, so to speak, of the east facade to form the side of the penthouse. This is the rear facade, which is another nightmare situation right now. This is where you can see that solarium of steel and of aluminum and glass. This facade, I have no idea, how this came about, but it's brick and it has a small portion. This floor sticks out about 18 inches and it's stucco. So this is what we're proposing to do. As you can see, this would be much more regular, much more sedate. And I'm looking for, to recreate some order and leaving, the material, the materials that it had. This would remain stucco. These would be there would be some Juliet balconies here. This is the sections that you can see, so that you can see where we're placing this penthouse. And we, in response to the community board meeting, we pulled back. We had this railing come to 2 feet from the line of the facade. but you could still see a little bit from the front of the house if you stood on the opposite side of the street. So we peeled that back. It's now 4 feet from the line of the facade, and it is completely invisible. As you can see also because we did it on the mock-up, so anybody can see that it's now, the view of the railing has disappeared. These are some renderings that will show you, this is the mock-up. Well, this mock-up still has the railing at 2 feet, but this is how it's going to be. And you can already see that the cornice line is free of any intrusions. And you can see a little bit of the top of the penthouse above the pediment of the synagogue. Here you are seeing it from the same side of the sidewalk coming from the west, and there is nothing to see because you can't see any of the penthouse from this point of view. This is the front. Again, for reference, the initial photograph from 1949. Unfortunately, we couldn't find anything earlier than that. This is how the house, what the house looks like now. And this is with the rendering of what we're proposing for the windows to be replaced and to be all matching and to be, because everything here has been replaced over the years in a very haphazard way. This is the vantage point from which you most see the penthouse, because as we were saying, we have this gap of 8 feet between the buildings. And this is now the facade now with things sticking out. This is where you can see the mock-up. And this is, I think actually, the rendering, because it's all the same material, the penthouse, to my mind, shows less. It pops out less than it does in the mock-up with the orange netting. This is the back of the house, which is very hard to photograph because the rear yard is anomalous. It's only 17 feet deep. You can't get far enough away to take a decent photograph. But so this is taken from the rear yard of the synagogue. And I wanted to show you this to show you the structure that we're planning on taking out, which again, it's like a UFO landed in the East Village. This is what we're proposing, sort of opening up the sky more in the rear yard. These photographs I wanted to show you, these are taken from Google Earth, so apologies for the low resolution. This is that solarium. I wanted to show you the context of these rear yards and these rear facades is very uneven, and again, people did different types of extensions over the years. And so there isn't really a rhythm at all. Also, these buildings are completely different. The buildings on the other side, so on 7th Street, have all kinds of really deep extensions into the rear yards. So there is no order to this inside of the block. That's the structure that we want to take down, and this is the penthouse that we would like to build. This is a shot taken from further back on, coming from the east, on the opposite side of the street, because you could see a little more from here, and this is what you would see. Somebody had commented about, why don't we zoom in more to show this more closely? But my opinion is that the street has its scale. And so when you're walking down the street, this is what you see. And you see this small piece of the building in the context of the whole block. So if I were to zoom in, I would be giving you the wrong view, because it would give you the view of that you would have through binoculars, which as you walk down the street, you don't normally have. So I think it's important to respect the experience of walking in this block. And in fact, to that end, I wanted to show you a series of photographs precisely walking down the block now with all the sheds for the restaurants. This is the mock-up that we built. So as you progress, this is going to be like a little movie. As you progress down the street from east to west, already when you're here, you don't see almost anything, and you definitely don't see the railing here. And then when you're past the front and you look back, there is no change to what it used to be. I mean, it's just this row of beautiful houses that was built. And, you know, again, our main objective is to bring it back to its original beauty. This is a detail of the railing. If anybody's interested, it's going to be steel, and I'm trying to make it as transparent as possible. Therefore, the posts, instead of being tubes, which could block more light, I'm planning on doing two steel plates that are held together just in a couple of spots, and then wire mesh. All of this is galvanized steel, which will initially be a little bit shiny, but it will dull out and become completely unreflective, and then we can paint it probably a bluish gray, just to somehow melt into the sky as much as possible.
Okay, is that it?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, I think we do have one question, and we might have some more. Commissioner Bland, please go ahead.
Thank you. What is the material on the lot line side toward the synagogue? Is that
It's
brick?
Brick, yeah, it's all brick.
It's all brick. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, and Commissioner Jefferson. Just accept the request to unmute.
Yeah. Thank you. I have two questions. One, on the ground floor, page 9. If you go back to page 9.
Page 9. I can do this, right? Yeah. 9. Oops. Oh, sorry. 8, 9. There. Yes.
I don't understand on the right-hand side what has changed from the center image. I noticed that, is that new masonry you're putting there? When I tried to blow it up, I couldn't
This is,
understand.
no, this is, yeah, this is the wrong color on the rendering. This is going to be exactly what this is. It's brownstone. The stoop, the stairs, the stoop, and this base is brownstone, and it will be just restored. It's actually in pretty good condition. So, but if it needs to be restored, it will be restored. It's brownstone, and it will stay brownstone. I didn't notice the difference.
So it has a wire mesh on top of it. Is that what I'm seeing from the? Is there some kind of guardrail on it or something?
This is a planter that's here. That, I mean, something to hold, you know, plants. And we were thinking of leaving it because it's actually kind of nice to be able to put some vases there and some greenery.
So nothing is changing. Nothing is changing on the.
Nothing is changing. Just the windows. Just the windows. The windows, yes.
Okay.
Need to be changed.
And the second question is, how wide is the width of the building?
The width of the building is 20 feet.
20 feet. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Okay, and just, what is the Florida floor height, or even the floor to ceiling height, which just either one would be helpful for the rooftop addition?
It's about 9 feet. It's on the sections, yes. But because the roof slopes back, what you see actually it's less than that, because it's nestled into the slope of the roof.
Okay.
Not 11, right?
So So it's 9 feet at the back end where the roof is sloped the
Right.
most, and then it gets less as you move forward. Okay.
Right, right.
All right. Other questions? Okay, not seeing any other questions right now. Let's move to public testimony. So if you're in the meeting and would like to speak, please raise your virtual hand and I'll turn it over to Anthony who can take us through the testimony.
Thank you, Sarah. We do have a few signups. The first person I'm going to bring in is Sarah Atman. Sarah, you should be in the meeting, so you just have to unmute yourself.
Hello, Sarah B. Natman from Village Preservation. 321 East 6th Street is one of a row of 5 circa 1853 row houses and the easternmost of the group. To its east is the 6th Street Community Synagogue, which dates to 1847, having been built as the German St. Matthew's Evangelical Lutheran Church. Thus, the view of the eastern side of 321 East 6th Street and its position as the terminus of this row of houses has stood over the adjacent house of worship throughout the row's entire existence. We believe that any changes to that nearly 170-year-old view should be carefully considered. Village Preservation is very uneasy about the placement of the proposed rail and the changes to the visible roof line. And while it has been moved back since it was presented at the community board at the front of the building, we would prefer that this aspect of the proposal be modified and that the rail be stepped back, not just from the front, but also from the sides to make it less prominent. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next up, I'm going to bring in Mark Bench. Mark, you should be in the meeting.
Thank you, Anthony. This is Mark Bench on behalf of the Victorian Society in New York. The proposal and presentation have been changed since our review of a few days ago, making it difficult to coordinate our comments, and so the testimony I'm about to give, in particular the final paragraph, will now be at variance with that deposited with the LPC. The Victorian Society finds many elements of this proposal to be appropriate. The removal of the modern greenhouse will not remove any historic material. The infill where the greenhouse was located will align with the existing walls, with no extension into the rear yard, and will use materials matching those on these facades. The alterations of the window openings on the side elevation will not remove a large amount of historical material, and the proposed new window openings on this facade are similar in size and proportions to the historic window openings on this building and others of this age and type. The proposed rooftop addition is modestly scaled and minimally visible from the street. The VSNY is uncertain that 6/6 and 9/9 double-hung windows are correct on a row house with Greek Revival and Italianate details built in 1853. By that time, the windows were more likely to have been 2/2 and possibly 4/4 on the parlor floor, or perhaps real or false casements with larger panes throughout. The 1/1 configuration could well date from the late 19th century alterations. It is unlikely, though not impossible, that a 6/6 and 9/9 configuration could date from that time, but there is no evidence of it on this building. The second major problem is with the design and placement of the roof railing around the street-facing roof deck. The proposed railing is heavily scaled with a tight galvanized steel mesh with 3-inch square openings as shown on board 20, which will make it very visible. The bigger problem is with the location of the railing, resulting in the significant visibility shown on boards 9 and 12. We caution that the proposed reviews on these boards have been thoroughly computer modified. The building has been refaced with different brick, and the brownstone trim and parlor railing are not accurate. Therefore, we must also find the suspect the view of the proposed roof railing. I commence the final paragraph. It appears that the front railing has been pulled further back, an improvement, but at the side it is still quite visible, and the VSNY recommends that the railing be set further back from this building edge and its features lightened to make it more transparent. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last sign up I have is Kelly Carroll. Kelly, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Kelly Carroll, Historic Districts Council. HDC found the large scope of work overall to be appropriate, but the railings should be substantially recessed. Currently, they're too close to the edge of the building and call attention to themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. And we don't have any more signups, and I don't see anyone with their hand raised. So we should be done with live testimony.
Okay, thank you. And Rich, do we have any additional written testimony?
We do have a resolution from Manhattan Community Board 3. They recommended approval with modifications, including determining the number of lights in the original windows, construct the railing using mesh that is visually neutral as possible, and move the railing at the front of the building back so it is less visible from the street, and distinguish the original historic eastern wall from the penthouse addition through some minor interventions, such as a brick course so that the original pitch of the roof is suggested.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'd like to turn back to Ms. Dini. Would you like to respond to the testimony? Much of it was about the window configuration at the parlor floor and the railing at the roof, but there's also there were also some comments about the penthouse as well and how to articulate that.
Well, as far as the number of lights in the double hung windows, we are definitely open to doing whatever the commission deems most appropriate. If it's to be 4/4, then it will be 4/4. I was trying to look. I looked for possible evidence of what it was originally, but couldn't find any. But in any case, I mean, for us, it was it's just that having lights, maybe it's 6/6 or 2/2, whatever it is, it gives the facade scale and elegance, and it's beautiful no matter what. I mean, it's going to be whatever you want, essentially, that we will be very happy to comply. In terms of the railing, the discussion at community board was exactly that, we should make it so that you don't see it at all from the front of the building. And that's exactly what we did, pulling it back 2 more feet. But it's clear that on the side of the building, you're going to see it because we do have those 8 feet of space between us and the synagogue. So there was a question as to what's the least visible material. And it's always, I thought that a thin mesh would be less visible, but the people at the community board were saying, well, no, because then they're going to be more dense. So I found that the 3, also we have DOB to contend with. By code, you cannot have any opening that's more than 4 inches. So I thought that the 3x3 would be a good compromise because it's wide enough so it allows, it's like 97%, it's on the last plate. It tells you how much open air you have relative to the steel. But it's very permeable. And then if we painted a light gray color, then it really shouldn't be that visible from down below. We spoke with the rabbi in the synagogue, by the way, and he was thrilled. We showed him the project because, of course, he's going to be the one seeing it more than anybody, and he liked it. So I think that what we're doing to that side facade is going to improve it a lot. If we were to pull the railing on the side back far enough that you couldn't see it from the side, then you basically end up with no livable deck. So if we could avoid that, we would definitely prefer not to have to give up the width, the width of the deck. I can't remember if there were other questions I should be answering to.
I think, yeah, and the final comment from the community board was the idea of doing some, a change in material at the penthouse. And I think you, when you presented it, you said you felt that a single material made it more recessive, but I don't know if you want to say any more about it.
Well, the comment from community board was not to change material, but more to somehow have a vestige of what that pitch was by putting a course of bricks that would mark where that slope was and then continue with the same bricks above. But just so, and it's a very nice thing. I mean, we're definitely open to the possibility to doing it. I personally don't know how visible at that scale that would be from the street, but I understand the sentiment behind it to see if we could preserve a memory of what that pitch was. So yeah, we can definitely do that. I didn't have time to redo a whole rendering showing what that would look like. Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll see, what happens in our discussion here. Okay, yeah. Commissioners, do we have any final questions? All right, so I'm starting to request to unmute all of you so that we can close the hearing and begin our discussion. So just look to accept that request. And Commissioner Goldblum, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Devonshire, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. So we have the question of the windows on the front, and as we heard in testimony, we don't know historically what those windows were, but this is a sort of a transitional Greek revival Italianate building built in the 1850s and could conceivably have had 6/6 and possibly a 6/9 or 9/9 at the parlor floor. The applicant is proposing a 6/6 parlor floor. Or it could have had what was sort of common in the 1850s is a 2/2 or 4/4, and at the parlor floor that would translate into a 2/6 really, with a wide muntin bar. So, there were a variety of kind of multi-light configurations that could have been found in these transitional buildings. So the question is, is this an appropriate configuration for this building that's sort of transitional Greek revival Italianate? And then there's the question of the penthouse and the railing, and sort of embedded in that is the removal of the solarium to do the penthouse. And we heard a lot of testimony about the visibility of the railing over the side, and we've heard some responses having to do with location versus material, mesh versus picket. So we can think about that as we have our discussion. Commissioner Jefferson, would you like to start this one?
Sure. I think that the suggestion of the lower window, the 2/6, I'm not an expert on this, so I think the 2/6 would be fine. Whatever my commissioners recommend. The issue of the railing obviously has to be pushed back, particularly from the east facade. And I have another comment, and that has to do with the penthouse itself. And the building is 20 feet wide, and I'm wondering if they push the wall back 2 feet more, make it 18 feet or 17 feet, the room itself. Then you won't see as much as you see from this slot. So I recommend this 8-foot slot. It's been there for how long? That if they push the penthouse back and reduce the visibility, is my comment.
Okay. All right. And I think, Corey, maybe you can look into this while we continue the discussion, but there's often a side yard requirement once you push a rooftop addition back from the side that if you can't just go 2 feet, it's either on the wall or it's 6 feet in, I believe. But because there's an alley, this may be an exception. So Corey, maybe you can sort of figure that out as we continue around in our conversation. Okay, Commissioner Gustafson?
well, let's start with this. There's a lot of really good things going on here. You know, and I really enjoyed the you know, direct and at times amusing presentation. You know, removing what's there on the back and putting some order in that in the rear of this building is just tremendous. So I'm very pleased with most of this project. You know, even those side windows that are such a hodgepodge, they're less of a hodgepodge now. That said, I would like them to work with the staff on figuring out how to make that railing a little less visible, whether that means moving it, materiality, whatever it is. And I do actually think that the bulkhead should stay, the top extension should stay exactly where it is on that wall. That picture right now, the view you get on the right side, I think that's fine. I don't think there's anything unacceptable about that. That's it. And as far as the window is concerned, I'm going to defer to the window experts when we get to the Michael section of the team.
Okay. All right, thank you. Commissioner Shamir Baran.
Thanks. I also don't really have a position or opinion about the windows, so we'll be happy to hear from others on that. I agree with both the testimony and others about the rail, trying to find a way for the rail to be a little bit pushed back or less visible. But I think otherwise, this project is done with just considered with a lot of sensitivity and I think thoughtfulness. And when I look at the section and as well as the photo, as the rendering of what it might look like from the side, I'm really convinced by it. I think the section is sort of like what a rooftop in my mind should look like. Sort of, it's like more embedded in the roof proper, in the low middle height or lower height of the actual roof, and sort of nestled in there. And when read from the side, even without this kind of watermark line that the architect was describing, it seems to me to be not obtrusive, not distracting, not sort of taking up too much room, sky room in that gap between the building and the synagogue. So I think it's well done and I can approve it.
Okay, great. Commissioner Holford-Smith?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the comments that have already been said. I think it's a very good project and will bring the building, it'll improve the building overall. I think the windows, I would also defer maybe to staff on what would be more appropriate, although the 6/6 does look a little busy, maybe a 2/2, but I would defer to people who know better than that. I think also the side windows are showing a 6/6 and they're much smaller windows, so they might want to be 2/2. I agree that seeing the new profile of the side of the building does not trouble me. In the past, other projects I've asked to see that sort of a line to demarcate the original roof line, but I don't think that's necessary here, and especially since at the back it's going to get muddied with that skylight, existing skylight, which already has an intrusion into that roof line. I think the change in brick, even though they're going to try to match, they'll never match perfectly. You will see a change in color between the two bricks, so that will mark it. I do agree that the railing on the east should be pushed in so it's less visible. Other than that, I think it's successful.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, as far as the windows, I kind of agree with other speakers, and I would go for 2/2 if all of our window experts think that's appropriate, just to give the applicant, you know, nicer street view, as that's one of the appropriate possibilities. But let's see what others have to say on the railing. I agree that I think that perhaps a different material. I think you're going to have the railing and the addition are both going to be visible, given the distance between the building and the synagogue. And I don't have a problem with that visibility. I do think that the treatment of the railing could be worked on with the staff just to try to make it less visible, because I think once you start moving it, you kind of get into other building, Department of Building rules and stuff that might be issues. I don't know, but I think that on the building, it's the addition itself, that we should do what we've done in other cases and ask that the material not be brick, because that would allow then you'd have the perception of the original building line, particularly if it's set back a little bit, if that needs to be done. But just using a different material, which I think Commissioner Bland was inquiring about earlier, would be the way to go. And that way you would cease to have it look like the building itself rising up, because it was also brick. So those would be my changes, and I agree that it's a very nice project in general.
Okay, thank you. So, and just, Diane, I'm just thinking about Commissioner Holford Smith's comment that because the brick won't match exactly, you may actually see that differentiation. So with that in mind, would that make you more comfortable with an all brick side?
I mean, if the other commissioners think the brick is the best alternative, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
I just wasn't, sure that two different bricks aren't going to still look like the same building, but
yeah,
depends on the brick, I can't say so.
Okay, all right, just wanted to understand. Okay, Commissioner Goldblum.
Okay, thank you. I will defer to the more historically informed Michael. And although I'll state a simply aesthetic preference of the 2/2s and then widened mullion faux casements on the ground floor. I think those are kind of cool, but that is not a historic opinion. That is a personal preference, which should have no play here. I think that Diana's correct about the change in materials. I think the fact that you won't get a good brick match is never a good, never something you want to shoot for or rely on. I think that the change in materials to a metal or a stucco would preserve the original form of the building, which is something we also always try to do. Although, frankly, the rendering as drawn is perfectly convincing, and I think is very, very attractive and appropriate if they can get the brick to kind of be as uniform and nice and tidy as they've got it. In general, I think otherwise it's an appropriate project. I think push the railing in if you can.
Okay, Commissioner Devonshire.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I agree with much of what my colleagues are saying about the addition, the railing, and I think it's fine to have brick on that bulkhead. With regard to the windows, by 1853, when this thing was built, we were well beyond even cylinder glass. There was float glass being made. And so assuming this was a speculative construction, it could have been anything, because if you had a developer who was trying to cheap out, he would have had 6/6 because that would have been easy to do. But the technology was already there for 2/2. Stylistically, Michael is completely correct that on the parlor level, they would have had the false casement with the wide center muntin with a central bead. But it's a tough one. But my gut tells me that a building of this type would have had 2/2, and they definitely on the parlor floor would have had the false casement.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, just I would defer to the experts on the windows, but I agree with the comment about setting back the railing. As to the brick, I think to the degree possible, if it's possible to get as close as possible, I think it should be brick.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Bland?
Well, on the windows, with all the deferrals and finally the expert spoke, it's clear that anything goes. Pretty much anything. So I'll defer as well, maybe to staff at this point. So whatever whatever is worked out there is going to be fine, I think. The rest of it, I think it's a very nice project. I also want to emphasize that fact because we got off by a few issues, and I think there aren't too many issues. In fact, for me, there's not any issue. I like the brick going up all the way. I think this rendering on the right of the slide that we're now looking at is very, very convincing. And if the brick changes a little bit, so what? You know, it's going to be such a momentary view of that you get. It's this little sliver of space opens up as you walk down the street. And I don't think I'm going to mind seeing a little piece of the rail, particularly the rail that was described by the architect. So I'm fine with everything as it's been proposed.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi.
I'm in agreement with so much that has been said here, but I want to echo something that was definitely mentioned by someone else. I truly appreciate the fact that this applicant, who has lived in this neighborhood, in this building for so many years, is so connected to the fabric of the community he lives in that he is, they're developing something to live in, to make their lives better. And while they do it, they're very open to input from the community. Come on. Process and as they're nearing the end of this project. So I want to thank the applicant for that and say, congratulations, you've done a really good job overall, and it's going to be a good addition to the landscape on this block. I am completely on board with whatever happens with these windows. After listening to everybody, I do have to say, I think 2/2 would work well with this style building and would work well with the facade. I don't have a problem with the brick on the side. And I agree with Diana's and Fred's assessment. You're going to see the railing on the side no matter what. So I'm not feeling compelled to have to move it. This is such a modest addition here. And I feel like it's not going to be that visible, and it's important to make sure that it works from a space perspective.
Okay, so I think, Commissioners, thank you. I mean, I think generally there's a lot of support for this work and appreciation for the care that's been taken here, and the sensitivity and the sort of rationalizing the back and trying to be deferential with the additions. And so I think where we are is an approval with modifications. I think on the windows, it seems like there's an openness to a 6/6, but that maybe the parlor floor proportions would need to be restudied, or maybe, in doing that, thinking about a 2/2 and the appropriate proportion for the parlor floor in that configuration. So I think, why don't we sort of allow the window replacement with a configuration that's consistent with the age and transitional style of the building to be further explored with staff. I think commissioners felt the railing should be, I think a few commissioners thought the railing should be less visible. Some suggested the mesh material, others suggested setting it back. But why don't we maybe also leave that to the staff? Because I think we have 3 who were okay with it as is, and then 2 or 3 I think would be okay with the mesh. So maybe we'll do the approval with the modifications to make it a mesh material. And if the staff doesn't feel that's addressing it, then they can talk to them about a further adjustment in the location. So I'll go ahead and make this motion again. Just because I think we're almost there and we can probably do this and capture everybody's concerns. Okay, So in the matter of docket number LPC 20-10594, 321 East 6th Street in the East Village, Lower East Side Historic District, a row house with Greek Revival and Italianate style details, built in 1853 and altered in 1897. This is an application to replace windows, construct a rooftop addition, install railings, and alter a rear yard addition. And I note the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the East Village, Lower East Side Historic District. Also note that the building is at the end of the row and was altered with a full width rear addition prior to the designation of the district. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the proposed black painted double hung windows in a multi-light configuration will harmonize with the transitional and Italianate style details present at the building and will unify the fenestration pattern at the building. That the raising of the brick parapet and the removal of a skylight at the east lot line facade will not alter the solid to void ratio of the secondary facade or remove any significant architectural features of the building. That the proposed rooftop addition featuring brick cladding throughout and a pair of black finished metal ship's ladders will be visible from public thoroughfares at oblique angles through a break in the street wall along at oblique angles through a break in the street wall along East 6th Street. That the roof railing will not be directly visible over the south facade, and the metal it says it's metal mesh rail material will help it remain a discrete presence at the roof. That the rooftop addition will be set back from the south, which is the East 6th Street, and the north rear facades to maintain the historic proportions of the building. That the work at the north facade will not be visible from a public thoroughfare. That the north facade is out of plane with the other buildings in the row, and therefore the change in fenestration pattern will not call undue attention to itself. And that the work will not diminish the special architectural and historic character of the building or the historic district. However, we recommend that the applicants continue to explore the window configuration in consultation with the staff, and that the railing be made less visible by ensuring that the mesh is transparent enough, and if the staff feels that further adjustments are needed, the staff will work with the applicants to do that. And that the brick be as close a match as possible on the rooftop addition to the side wall, and the staff review samples prior to construction. Okay, and I think that would cover everybody's concerns. So Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion? Oh, actually, I'm not sure about you because you had some other thoughts. So Commissioner Gustafson, would you second that motion?
Second.
Okay, and Rich, would you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
and Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Okay, with 11 in favor and none opposed, the motion carries.
Okay, so that's approved with those modifications. Please continue to work with the staff on those final refinements. Good luck. And we'll move to the next item.
The next item is number 5, LPC 21-04763, application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 1032, lot 48, 330 West 42nd Street, the McGraw-Hill Publishing Company building, individual landmark. A modern international style office building designed by Raymond Hood and Godley and Fullox and built in 1931. The application is to replace signage at the building crown and install storefront infill signage and a canopy. And I will note that the portion of that description to replace the signage at the building crown has been removed from the scope of work. So in this case, it's actually just to install storefront infill signage and a canopy along the base of the building.
The applicants have joined the hearing. You now have control of the presentation and you may begin.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Bill Higgins of Higgins Quaysbarth, and it's a pleasure to be before you. Our partners have frequently been here, but I have not recently, and it's very nice to see everyone and to be here. So I would like to next, please. Thanks. So as Corey said, this is a proposal that really centers on the base and storefront infill and signage of the McGraw-Hill building, an individual landmark, Raymond Hood, completed in 1931. On the left is the location of the building between 8th and 9th Avenues on the south side of 42nd Street with a facade facing 41st Street as well. And mainly what we'll be talking about are proposals for the base of the building at 42nd Street and at 41st Street. On the right, familiar outline of the building. I think it's kind of remarkable that even surrounded by the tall buildings that have grown up around it since it was originally built, the McGraw-Hill building is still such a powerful and unique presence on the skyline. Next. Some views of the building, its notable characteristics. As Corey said, it's a sort of a combination of an international style and a modern building. And again, not necessarily relevant to this proposal, but it's so interesting to think that only about 5 years or so before this, Hood was designing the American Radiator building, which was Art Deco with a very strong look back to Gothic revival, and that within 5 years or so, this powerful change to the international style / modern produced this terrific building. The ribbon windows, the terracotta cladding, that very distinctive crown of the building with the McGraw-Hill name worked into the masonry with terracotta, and the numerous setbacks producing terraces. All of these, as you'll hear, have to do with the overall project, although not all the portion that the commissioners are formally reviewing today. Next. And historical views, again, not relevant to this, but I think it's so fascinating that when the surrounding buildings were lower, and many of them even back to Italianate row houses, there was almost a surreal quality about the presence of this building, which is really quite wonderful. Next. And other views showing that same character. Next. So talking about current and proposed conditions, starting from the top, as Corey mentioned, the proposal as advertised was to change the McGraw-Hill signage name at the top of the building into the address utilizing the same terracotta. But this was an example, I think, of the community board process, particularly working extremely well and as it should work. The conversations with particularly the committee at Community Board 4 were extremely thoughtful, very, very collegial, very much the way I think the whole public review process is meant to work. And the project team, and particularly the ownership, became convinced that rather than changing the McGraw-Hill name, even though it would have been a very close match of materials and color and and numerals and typeface, etc. The historical name is the McGraw-Hill building, even though there are two other McGraw-Hill buildings around, one of them still occupied by McGraw-Hill. There really is a quality about this that that ownership and all of us agreed deserves to stay. So there's a certain Zen-like quality to this proposal that it turns out to some degree to be about what we are not doing. This is kind of like everyone hearing the sound of the tree when it does not fall in the forest and simply stays up the way it is. So that's the crown of the building. There are some other interventions that move in the direction of restoration or rationalizing or being in the spirit of the original, which qualify for staff level approval. In the past, there's been extensive work on the terracotta, restorative work. This project includes rationalizing the windows so that HVAC louvers, et cetera, occur in a more logical and harmonious pattern. It includes changing non-original doorways that lead to the non-original doors, not doorways, that lead to some of those terraces on the upper part of the building. And as you'll see, some of the storefront infill changes, much of the project has qualified for staff level approval. But if we look at the bottom of these rendered elevations, the first part of this proposal are proposed changes to signage and main entry door infill on the 42nd Street facade. Next. And similarly, changes to infill on the 41st Street facade. Next. And here are two slides. This one of the east elevation and the next one of the west elevation, where there are no proposed changes that are that are to be approved or reviewed at commission level. I will mention, though, if you look at the top of the current and proposed, you'll see the outlines of as existing two really substantial HVAC cooling towers that are up there, and we are proposing to remove those and replace them with virtually invisible, much lower new cooling towers. So that's the sort of spirit of this project as we see it. Next. So first of all, the building identity and main entrance proposals for 42nd Street. Next. Some history. On the left, this is a 1931 photograph showing the original condition of the building entry, where the McGraw-Hill name in that characteristic period face was in the main horizontal that goes above the storefront, and then the 330 West 42nd Street address was in that secondary horizontal. So both the name of the building and the address were focused on the main entrance. If you look at the main entrance itself, you'll see that it has a somewhat complex configuration of horizontals and verticals in the door and transom system, which we'll talk about a little bit more. On the right, on the upper image is about 1960. This is the building entry with the McGraw-Hill name still there on the major horizontal. The address has disappeared from the secondary horizontal, and if you look closely, you'll see that the doors have been changed. There are still the three pairs of doors, pairs of doors for the entry, but the doors themselves have been changed from what we think is bronze in the original doors to stainless steel, and the transom has been very much simplified. The address has been moved to the horizontal above the doors, and then below, on the right, about 1984, the McGraw-Hill name has disappeared. address has moved around again up to the transom. And there you can see more clearly that the doors have and the transom system has changed. So there's been this history of change and varying ways of expressing the identity of the building at the main entrance. Next. So here's a photograph of what is there now. And as you can see in the main entrance, the 330 address is above the doors, and the same non-original stainless steel doors are in place. Next. These are comparative elevations. At the top is the current elevation, which is really a rendered version of the photograph that we just looked at. In the middle is a previously approved elevation. There is extant a storefront master plan for the building. And so this previously approved condition with the the combination of doors and display windows at the storefront, and with the signage system in that sort of secondary horizontal, was all approved at staff level. But that did not do anything with the name or the address over the door or the main door infill itself. So if you look at the bottom, this is what we are proposing today. If you look closely, you'll see that there are some changes to the positioning of doors versus display windows and of signage. Those are all in conformance with the staff level master plan approval. What we are really proposing before you today is concentrated around the main entry. We have the 330 West 42nd Street address, which we are proposing to go into the major horizontal rather than the secondary one. And we are proposing to do a new door and transom system, which does not restore the original in detail. It does make the doors slightly taller, but it changes back from the non-original stainless steel to a bronze system, and it provides more of a recollection of the system of horizontals and verticals that gave the original its character. Next. So here's a, excuse me, I have to move this. Okay. So here's a combination of original at left, current in the center, and proposed at right elevation drawings showing those conditions. So if you look between the original condition on the left and the proposed condition on the right, I think you'll see that what we are proposing reinstates a lot of the sort of basic geometry of the original condition. It does raise the doors a bit, but I think at the same time, it puts back horizontals in the doors and in the transom system that really is much more in the spirit of the original. And then it shows proposing the address in that major horizontal in a system of numerals and letters very much based on the original. Next. So we'll quickly go over those three conditions in elevation, plan, and section. I think the most important thing perhaps to note is that the original recess of the doors was 6 feet beyond the outermost plane of the facade. So everything that is proposed to happen with the doors is happening 6 feet back from the main facade plane. We are proposing to keep that same 6 foot recess. Next. Then this is the present condition, much simplified from the original. And next. So this is the proposed condition. Again, we're proposing to raise the doors from 7 feet to something like 8 feet 2 inches. But with the recess of the whole system and with the reinstatement of that that combination of horizontals and verticals, which really defined the geometry of the original, we think that while this is not restorative, it brings us much closer to the spirit of the original entry. Next. And this is a rendered kind of close up on the top of the original condition with the McGraw-Hill name and the address below it. What we are proposing to do here is to let the McGraw-Hill name speak for itself where it does that most powerfully, which is at the crown of the building and in original fabric, and to do the address of the building here. If you look closely, and I particularly look at the two W's, the one in McGraw and the one in West, and you'll see, I think, that Doyle Partners, the graphic designers, made a real effort to be as close to the literal design and the spirit of the design in the proposed new address at the entry. Next. So now we go to this, come to the second and final part. This is the 41st Street ground floor infill. Next. So here is an existing set of existing photographs. So this is on the south side of the building on 41st Street. So in that top left image, to the left is west and to the right is east. And as you can see, it is largely loading docks with at the far eastern bay an entrance to the building above. Those loading dock roll down doors are pushed right out to the edge of the original columns. So it's a very sort of flat infill, and the infill of those eastern bays, you see them on the top right there, are also pushed out to the front. So it's a very kind of functional utilitarian design. Next. Here's the condition as well as we could find it documented historically. If you look at the photo on the left, you'll see that the major difference is that the loading dock infill was recessed quite deeply all the way to the back of the original columns. So it gives a lot more of a sense of depth and shadow, multiple planes to the infill. And those two photos on the right are what little bit we have documented of that secondary entrance that was on the east edge of the building, the easternmost bay, where there's a sign that above the entrance on the horizontal that gives the name of the building. Next. So here's a rendered elevation of what we are proposing. Several things. We are proposing to change some of the loading dock bays because, of course, in the original McGraw-Hill use, it was a combination, almost like a newspaper building, like the New York Times building, of offices and a fully functional printing plant. There was a need for a lot more loading dock space than there is now. So the proposal is on those three bays that you see to somewhat show the more of the vitality on the interior of the building by devising a glazed system that we hope manages at the same time to be contemporary and designed, but also to carry an industrial feeling and to be in some way harmonious with the horizontal office windows above. Then we have the three bays, and then at the far east, we have a designed, but we think simple entry to the building itself. Next.
Hey, what's your theory?
Here's the combination of the current above and the proposed below, which I think makes kind of clear what we are proposing to do. We have more detail next. So here is an elevation and a section of the existing infill, and you can see, particularly in the section, how those roll down doors are mounted right on the face of the building, and the rollers are actually projecting from the face of the building. Next. And so this is what we are proposing for one of those bays with the glazed infill. If you look at the section, you'll see, I think, the most important thing, which is that infill is now being pushed all the way back to the rear of the columns, reinstating that sense of depth and shadow and multiple plane. Next. And comparative sections of the existing on the left, proposed roll down loading dock infill in the center, and proposed glazed infill on the right, again with reinstating that 2'8" recess that was there originally. Next. And here is that easternmost bay, where we are proposing this will be not the main entry to the building, but certainly a significant entry to the building from the south. And so we wanted to keep that kind of simple infill, but to give it a bit more of a designed character and to make it more identifiable. And so proposing to change the infill material to a bronze that relates to the bronze of the main entry, and then a very simple projecting canopy above. It's not a huge projection. I think it's 5 feet with the 330 numerals on the top. We're trying to hit that spot where it is designed but not over designed, and kind of relates to the functional quality of this elevation of the building. Next. And then we're showing that existing and proposed entry conditions in the elevation plan and section with the materials, where, as you can see, we're keeping the historic palette of materials and colors quite closely, I think. Next. So there it is, historical photograph on the left, rendering on the right, again showing that reinstatement of the recess and the quality of the overall infill, which we think is, hopefully you'll agree, is harmonious, and although it's designed and new, we think it's a nice echo and a reflection of the spirit of the original infill. Next. So that's that is the project entirely. It is. I will mention that this is not a residential conversion. This will continue to be a commercial / office building, or office / commercial building, as it has always been. And we feel that the message here is that what we're shooting for is certainly in a sense, a modernized or a version of the building that is brought to the current day, but very much has the power and presence and character that it has always had in whatever context it has been in. So.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And we have, I know, at least one question. So Commissioner Goldblum, go ahead.
Nothing to do with the presentation per se. How's the terracotta doing?
The terracotta is doing well. It got a very nice restoration, which the Conservancy gave a Lucy Moses Award to maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and it's holding steady.
Okay, Commissioner Shamir Baran, please go ahead.
Thanks. Just want to understand a little bit more the rationale for removing the McGraw-Hill name on the bottom. And Stephen Doyle is the most brilliant of all, but what's the reason for it? I don't think I understood replacing the address.
Yeah, well, for one thing, we're not proposing to remove it. The McGraw-Hill name is gone, and it's been gone since the early 1960s from that part of the building. And so we felt that, you know, what people are going to, well, although we certainly welcome the name continuing to be popularly or historically the McGraw-Hill building, you know, hopefully the building is empty. So there's going to be a whole new bunch of tenants, we hope, who will be at 330 West 42nd Street. So we felt that, you know, it would be a whole different story if the original McGraw-Hill name were still there. But it is long gone. And because there was historically a combination of the McGraw-Hill name and the 330 address at the main entry, we felt that this was a good compromise and a good expression of the future use of the building.
Okay, other questions? Okay, not seeing any other questions at this time. We'll move to public testimony and we may have more questions afterward. And so if you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And I'll turn it over to Anthony to take us through that testimony.
Thank you. We do have a few signups. The first person that I'm going to bring in is Megan Weatherby. Megan, you should be in the meeting now. You just have to unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. I'm Megan Weatherby, the Executive Director of the Art Deco Society of New York. And ATSME considers the McGraw-Hill building a major monument of early modernism. In the words of the designation report, the building's design was the product of the gradual shift in architectural taste from the machine age abstract decorativeness of the modern or Art Deco style to the corporate age utility of the international style, and of the constantly innovative and growing architectural genius of Raymond Hood. We commend the applicants for their proposed modification to the building's facade, which show great respect to the architect's original intent. In particular, we're pleased that the owner clearly worked to create new signage for the 42nd Street facade that uses the distinctive typographic style, dimensions, and color of the original McGraw-Hill Deco signage. As for modifications to the 41st Street side, we think it's commendable that the proposal outlines a modest tenant entrance that does not detract from the building's original design, as some Art Deco conversions have done in the recent past. It's also admirable that the proposed storefronts reference the building's distinctive horizontal band of windows that have the appearance of ribbon windows, which illustrate McGraw-Hill's stylistic shift to the international style. Though the McGraw-Hill lobby is not a designated interior landmark, and though its ceiling has been altered, its walls bear an unmistakable resemblance to the building's iconic exterior. The alternating blue and green steel bands separated by the silver and gold colored metal tubes at the main entrance are seamlessly carried into the lobby to complement its green enamel steel walls. We hope LPC will encourage the applicants to devote the same level of care in preserving the lobby's exceptional Art Deco detailing, so clearly a continuation of the building's facade, as the owner has shown in the proposal for the exterior. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Megan. I will bring in Mark Bench next. Mark, you should be in the meeting now.
Thank you, Anthony. Good afternoon. This is Mark Bench on behalf of the Victorian Society of New York. The Victorian Society does not usually testify on buildings of this age and style, but as one of our reviewers spent many years writing permits for work at the building, we'd like to comment. First, we find the proposed sign program entirely appropriate, as it conforms to the style, details, and placement of the distinctive original signage at the building. We are relieved that the plan does not call for removal of the iconic McGraw-Hill sign at the crown, as this sign is such an integral part of the history, iconography, and style of the building. The applicants are proposing the installation of very handsome display windows in 3 of the ground floor garage bays on the 41st Street facade. Looking at the rendering on page 22, we immediately notice that they make no provision for entrances into these stores. West 41st Street has long been the somewhat grungy stepchild of this area, but Manhattan is evolving so quickly that we feel it's inevitable that in the very near future, some tenant will be asking for an entrance here. We therefore suggest that to simplify future reviews, the applicant consider creating a master plan for these bays and including a design for storefront entrances on West 41st Street. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Next up, I'll bring in Kelly Carroll. Kelly, you should be in the meeting. You just have to unmute yourself. I am not seeing her here. Should I move on to the next person?
Yes, why don't you move to the next person and
Okay.
see if she can get back in?
Okay.
See if we can find her.
So next up, I'll bring in, I believe it's Theodore Grunenwald. The last three digits are 443, the phone number. So.
I'm in now.
Oh, there
okay,
you are.
great.
Sorry
Okay.
about that. I had the circle for a long time. It's very odd, but I'm
that's
here now.
strange.
Thank you for waiting.
No problem.
Kelly Carroll, Historic Districts Council. HDC thanks our colleagues at Manhattan CB4 for their staunch advocacy of preserving Raymond Hood's masonry McGraw-Hill crown. We also thank the preservation consultant, Higgins and Quaysbarth, for their negotiations and the owner for their flexibility. This is a wonderful example of the crucial role that community boards play in the stewardship of our city's landmarks. HDC applauds this application, and we hope the same open-mindedness regarding the preservation of the exterior elements of this building apply to the interior lobby as plans move forward. While not an interior landmark, surviving skyscraper lobbies of this vintage should be preserved and restored. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. So now I will bring in Theodore. Last four digits, 443. Let's see. Okay, I guess. Theodore, you should be, we can hear you now.
Good afternoon, Chair Carroll, commissioners and staff. I'd like to speak to an aspect of this application that may yet be.
You do have to, sorry to interrupt you, you do have to state your name
I'm so sorry.
for the record.
This is Theodore Grunwald. I'd like to speak to an aspect of this application that may not yet be known to the commissioners, and that is the demolition of the lobby, before and after renderings of which can be viewed by the commissioners on my Twitter feed at Ted Grunwald. That's TED GRUNEWALD. One of New York City's most winning Art Deco lobbies, which the late Fred Papert, the former chair of the 42nd Street Redevelopment Commission, described in a 1978 New York Magazine article as flashy and gorgeous, gold and silver and green. If Fred Astaire had worked in an office building, this would have been the one. The intact 1931 lobby, with the addition of sympathetic lighting fixtures added in the 1980s, is an astonishing polychromatic Emerald City extravaganza. It rates as one of New York City's finest Art Deco lobbies, together with the Film Center building, the Chrysler building, Hildreth Mier's Gold Room at number 1 Wall Street, the former Irving Trust building, and Ralph Walker's Western Union and Barclay Vesey buildings, and Sloan and Roberts' former RCA, later the GE building on Lexington Avenue, and is considered one of the very finest examples of Art Deco in the world. The demolition of the McGraw-Hill lobby would be on par with the 1968 demolition of London's 1929 Strand Palace Hotel lobby, designed by O.P. Bernard, fragments of which were salvaged and reinstalled in the Victoria and Albert Museum. The architect of today's application did an extraordinarily sensitive and intelligent restoration of Gordon Bunshaft's travertine-clad Grace Building on 42nd Street, and should be commended for the extraordinarily thoughtful and tasteful alterations presented in today's application, including retention of the McGraw-Hill name at the crown, although we would love to see the entrance fully restored as well. Going by Twitter this morning, it is the hope of many in the architectural community that the architect, together with the Landmarks Preservation Commission, can convince the owner to retain Raymond Hood's extraordinarily important lobby, which has such a unique integral relationship to its exterior. Outside brought in, inside brought out. Apple Store fever is as contagious as COVID-19. Please do not allow this irreplaceable Art Deco masterpiece to be replaced by middle-brow minimalism. Please hold an emergency hearing to save one of the world's most important examples of
Theodore, I do have to
Art
ask you to
Deco
sum up
without
your
delay.
testimony.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so we do have one more person with their hand raised, and that is Thomas Collins. Thomas, you should be in the meeting now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, just state your name for the record.
Sorry. There, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Great. So my name is Thomas Collins. I'm a graduate student studying architectural history at CUNY. And I'm calling in today because I'm very alarmed over the fate of the McGraw-Hill building's lobby. I hope I'm wrong, and perhaps the architects or client could chime in here to address my concerns. But based on what I see in the presentation and in renderings on the architect's website, it really does look like a substantial portion of the interior lobby will be demolished. And if this is true, this would be a huge loss for the architectural heritage of the city. Raymond Hood's lobby is really one of the most exceptional, streamlined, modern interiors. For those of you on the commission who aren't familiar, the lobby is T-shaped with the same green, black, and chrome banding on the entrance that continues into the lobby walls, leading to a central elevator core, which is surrounded by this really brilliant emerald green enameled walls. And so the visitor is surrounded by this sea of color. It's really quite dramatic. The architecture critic Paul Goldberger once wrote, "The lobby, an exuberant array of turquoise, navy blue, silver, and gold stripes, is perhaps one of the best rooms of the period in New York," end quote. I understand the lobby is not designated and thus outside the jurisdiction of LPC for today's hearing, but it begs the question of why this space was never designated in the first place. The last interior designation occurred over 3 years ago for the Rose Reading Room, and there are many, many outstanding examples of unprotected interior landmarks that are, and this is absolutely one of them. This is really just the tip of the iceberg. Architecturally significant midtown lobbies and public interiors are being demolished left and right, and no one's really talking about this. I understand the agency has many other priorities, and that's fine, but the demolition of any interior of this stature ought to serve as a wake-up call. And I would really sincerely hope that LPC will move forward and consider reviewing this interior space for future designation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We don't have anyone else who's raised their hands, so I think we are done with live testimony.
Okay, thank you. And Rich, do we have any additional written testimony?
We do have a resolution from Manhattan Community Board 4, and they recommended approval.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'm going to turn back to Bill and see if you would like to address comments, which for the proposed work on the exterior were largely supportive, but there was a suggestion that about entrances on 41st Street, so you may want to address that. And if you wish to speak about the plans on the interior, you're welcome to do that as well.
Thank you. I have to say I look to the commission for any guidance as to how deeply we should get into the lobby. I'm certainly prepared to talk about it, but let me know when it's going too far.
Right. Well, and just as it isn't part of this application, I think we don't need to present all details to it right now. But I think just a high level or overview of kind of the owner's intent would be helpful.
Happy to do
to
that.
address the comments.
Commissioner Carroll, if appropriate, I would like to address that very simply. But if you want to talk about the 41st Street, please, Bill, you go first.
That's Dan Shannon, who's the architect. Thanks, Dan.
I'll introduce myself. Yeah, thank you.
So regarding 41st Street, that is an interesting idea, and I think we'll certainly talk about it among the team in the event that there is a need for doors in that infill. That certainly seems like a reasonable thing to consider. So we're happy to think about whether that a master plan or treating the possibility of entries makes sense. Just very briefly before Dan talks about this, with respect to the lobby, I'm speaking about the whole team now, ownership, architects, consultants. We certainly recognize the character and quality of the lobby, although it has been changed to a degree rather greater than has been discussed today. But still, there is a great amount of original character and original fabric there. And although we do not have a landmark on the interior, we are cognizant of that. And what we are trying to achieve, it's not as Dan will tell you, it is not a finalized design by any means. But what we are trying to achieve is a harmonious combination of new and old, both in terms of actual fabric that is kept in place, and in terms of the language of the new fabric and the new design for portions of the lobby in order to meet contemporary use and circulation, etc. So what we are looking to do here is to have a valid and productive conversation between new and old fabric. We are not proposing a restorative approach, but we are proposing one in which historic fabric, historic vocabulary, and contemporary fabric and vocabulary interact in a harmonious way. This is not intended to be get rid of the old and do something corporate, as someone said. That's not where we are aiming to go with this. Dan?
Bill, thank you very much. My name is Dan Shannon, MDAS Architects, the managing partner in charge of the project. And I wanted to reiterate and stress that the design for the interior of this building, the lobby in particular, is currently in progress. And any images that are shown on Twitter or have been looked at are merely early design sketches, and they do not represent the current design, the progressing design, or the approved design with our intentions to build. So they were not on our website, and they were in our server, so I'm not certain how they were released. But as Bill eloquently said, in great admiration for the building as a whole and its design, we are progressing by incorporating both original material that is there and designs that are referential or incorporating the building design, both in material and in color and in profile. And as we did, and as Theodoro mentioned, at Grace, and then later at buildings like the General Motors building on Fifth Avenue, we're very proud of the work we're doing in transforming important buildings in New York City to creating interior spaces that both respect and respond to the original and transform them a bit toward the current tenancy requirements. And we continue to progress the design with Bill's company ownership in the light of which we've talked about. Thank you all.
Okay, commissioners, do we have any final questions before we move to our discussion? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions, so I am beginning to unmute everyone so that we can close the hearing and begin our discussion. So Commissioner Chen, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Devonshire, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And, you know, as was presented, the application before us today is to replace the non-historic infill at the 42nd Street entrance with new bronze finished doors that are slightly taller than the historic, but in keeping with the original configuration, and to install a new sign with the address above the storefront, the building entry, that is in the same typeface that the missing historic sign was. And on 41st Street to replace the loading bays with new infill and to do a new entrance as well. So we'll, and that entrance features a modest marquee with identification. So we'll start the discussion. Commissioner Lutfi, would you like to begin?
I have to say, I'm going to be very brief. I really appreciate the respect that the applicant has shown toward preserving and preserving the spirit of what was here as they make modifications to the building. First and foremost, I'm so happy that the McGraw-Hill sign is remaining on top of the building. I only wish it had happened with the Pan Am building. And I think the, you know, the signage at the base of the building is a wonderful homage, you know, in every way, and a great work of graphic design. And I wholeheartedly support that, as well as the addition of the change from stainless steel to brass in the entry doors. I have no problem with increasing the height of the doors. I appreciate what's going on at the in terms of the retail. There have been some minor modifications. They all seem to work. I'm sure the owner is maintaining as much flexibility in terms of retail tenants, and that's why they have a master plan. And then as you move to the side of the building, I think the moves that have been made in terms of the garage doors work very well, and I really like the way the retail. I'm surprised there were no entrances to the retail at the ground floor here, but I like the sense of the inside a little more porous with the outside. On the side, I think it works very well. Like the use of materials here, the painted steel. And I think the second entrance is superbly done. It's very understated. It's in keeping again with the spirit of the deco design. And that's it.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Commissioner Bland, why don't you go next?
Oh, going that way. Okay. Well, it doesn't need to be said by me because everybody knows the importance of this building and the development of New York. It's not only an individual landmark, it's one of the most important, I think, that our city has. And it's certainly designed by the most prolific and also inventive architect of the era, Raymond Hood. So the carefulness with which Bill Higgins described the changes that are to be made here is certainly warranted and expected. So I have no quarrel with anything. Like everyone else, I was certainly relieved to hear the top sign is remaining. To me, it's just integral to the whole idea of this place. I think what they've done is very consistent with the nature of the building. It updates it in the right ways. It's an appropriate way, and it's proof again how such an important landmark can undergo subtle, appropriate change to keep it relevant and occupied. During different eras. So I think this was a thrilling, altogether a thrilling application to hear, and I have no quarrel with any of it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I agree with Fred that Jeannie, this is such an important building, and I totally echo the sentiment that I wish the Pan Am building still retain the old iconic Pan Am sign on the rooftop. I think the applicant has done a very sensitive job in respecting this important landmark. Raymond Hood certainly is a fabulous designer, and I think that the way the bottom is treated, the cargo loading bays. And I think the replacement of the sign in the same fonts and be respectful. And I think just like Fred and Jeannie, I think this is a well done application.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Devonshire.
I think the approach is appropriate.
Okay, Commissioner Goldblum.
I agree. I would echo the sentiment of the testimony, however, as someone who's been to this building many times, the lobby, even though it has bizarro lights, is remarkably intact. And I think that certainly is of the level that would merit a designation. And I know that the applicant is a careful and excellent designer who's worked extensively with landmarked interiors as well as exteriors. And I hope and pray that they do preserve the historic interior so that it can be landmarked either before their work, during it, or after. In terms of the work on the exterior, I think that the back is fine. I have no qualms about the back at all. I think the front is also totally appropriate. The only comment that I would make is if it were possible to reword your genericized building address in some way that you could throw some text into the lower register. I think part of the intention of the original design was to have lots of kind of visual activity focused on the building entrance, and hence the 2 tiers of text. I think that if it were possible to reword it or find a way to rephrase your address or spell out the words or something like that, that would allow for a second tier of text, I think it would enhance the effect of the entrance as it was originally intended.
All right, thank you. All right, and Commissioner Chapin?
I also think this is a very sensitive approach, and I'm very pleased with it in general. Michael's suggestion is interesting, which could be explored, I guess. But even as it is, I think it's very much direction. I also share the. It would be great if we could look at the lobby, if that's possible in the future, and work with the owners and architects and perhaps move toward an interior designation. I think that would be. I agree that would be appropriate if it was possible to do that. But as for this particular application, I think it's generally excellent, and perhaps they might consider the suggestion that Michael just made as a possibility.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Holford-Smith?
I agree with a lot of the comments that have already been made. I think this is a big improvement to the entrance to the building, and I think the changes to the storefronts are appropriate according to their master plan. And I think it's would be a good idea for them to establish a master plan for 41st Street, because I can see that would be something that will come back to us in the future. I'm intrigued by Michael's suggestion to break up the text and have it on two lines. I think that would be worth exploring. And I certainly would encourage the owner and the applicant, the architect, to preserve as much of the interior as possible, so that we can landmark the interior of this lobby, which is an incredible space, one of a kind space.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shamir Barron?
Yes, thanks. As Bill Higgins said, there is just something about this building, and it's clearly Raymond Hood's genius. But in addition, it might be also my oldest friend in the world, Tom Shearer, the great designer and decorator, family lore, and I believe true from other information, his grandfather's sister, his great aunt, Lois Shearer McGraw, selected the color and so of the tile. And that's interesting because, maybe Hood didn't select that color. Doesn't that make sort of sense? But I think it's an interesting addition to our to the history. But I think that a couple things in terms of the proposals for the front doors. I suppose it's all right to make them taller, but I actually think that the taller doors should include that extra line. I mean, there really is a difference between obviously the deco intention here is to compress, as we've seen in other situations, Lehigh, other situations where that kind of that lower height for entry is exaggerated. And here, by picking a taller door, you're kind of blowing that up a bit. So I think that another line needs to be inserted inside of the door, potentially, to reference that original height or that datum in as it's scored in the rest of the facade. The other entrances, what were now being turned into the rolling doors, I think that's fine. Again, the proportion is a little bit off. They're not as kind of horizontal as they probably should be, but I can accept that. I think Commissioner Goldblum's absolutely right. That second level in the sign is important. And again, as brilliant as Stephen Doyle is, and always like adding a little bit of a kind of an ironic twist to the transposition, interpretation of the graphic intention, here it would be interesting to see another level and perhaps for it to be lettering rather than numbers, something. But I think it would be interesting. I think that the issue with and we haven't seen it, but the issue I will see with the lobby has so much to do with what we're considering right now, because unlike other lobbies, in this case, the exterior fabric kind of rolls into the interior. So this kind of, there's this intentional extension of the bands, of the material, of the coloring into the interior lobby. And so the possibility of actually losing that, in a sense, relates back to our, it blurs a little bit the relationship or the distinction between exterior and interior lobby and exterior lobby. And I think it's going to be a complicated thing for the architect to figure out if, in fact, what they're saying they want to do is to, you know, to meld the sort of the old with the new. But again, Stephen Doyle's interpretive sensibility might help in that regard. And I don't know what that means architecturally, but it would be an interesting thing to maybe consult him on the interior. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Gustafson.
Yeah, I'm fine with the proposal as is in every respect. I would just note for the enthusiasts of this building, if you like cool views of buildings in New York, this one happens to be surrounded by the rooftop garages of the Port Authority building. So for those of us who actually park in those places, you're up close and personal to the east and south walls of the building. It's a really cool view anyway. So, and it's free.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Jefferson.
A wonderful presentation, and I think the work is just beautiful, appropriate.
Okay, great. So I think where we are, I want to thank the applicants for this presentation and thank the public for their testimony as well. So I think where we are is we actually have enough votes to approve it as is, but I think that we should encourage the suggestion to think about the double lines of signs at the entry, and maybe they can think about the configuration and picking up that datum line as Commissioner Shamir Barron suggested. So we'll do those recommendations as encouragement, but I think we have enough to approve it as is. And you know, I want to just echo my fellow commissioners' hope that you know, that the work on the interior is sensitively approached in a very sensitive manner. So, Commissioner Lutfi, would you make the motion to approve?
Sure. In the matter of docket LPC-21-04-763, 330 West 42nd, McGraw-Hill Publishing Company Building, individual landmark. Modern international style, designed by Godley and built in 1931. The application is to replace signage at the building crown, install storefront infill signage, and a canopy. I recommend approval, finding that the work will not damage, eliminate, or conceal any significant architectural or historic features, that the proposed overscaled address signage over the 42nd Street central entryway will replicate the location, scale, materials, color, and character of the original chrome lettering of the original McGraw-Hill signage, that the existing entry infill is not historic and is a result of the mix of infill done from before designation and later approved by the commission. That the introduction of horizontal transom element at the main entry will better recall the historic scale and character of the entry, that raising the height of the entry doors from 7 feet to 8'4" is in keeping with the proportions of main entrances at large monumental office buildings, that the replacement of the 41st Street facade, altered loading bay and fill will restore the historic full depth of piers with setback infill and will eliminate security gate housing and other accretions that are detrimental to the facade, that the proposed glazed metal storefront infill with horizontal mullions at 3 bays recalls the character of tower fenestration at a different scale, and the painted finish will complement the materials of the facade, that the proposed bronze entry infill at the secondary facade featuring a fixed canopy with signage is harmonious with the materials and details of the facade, and that the work is supportive of the special architectural and supportive historic character of the individual landmark building.
Great, thank you. And in addition, we'll just encourage them to think about the configuration of the signage and the doors as recommended by Commissioner Goldblum and Commissioner Shamir Baran. But otherwise, Commissioner Gustafson, would you second the motion to approve?
Second.
Okay, thank you. And Rich, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Baran,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Did you hear
Commissioner
me?
Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
I thought you did. Aye.
Sorry about that. And Commissioner Holford Smith. You're on mute.
Aye.
All right. With 11 in favor and unopposed, the motion carries.
Okay, that's approved. Thank you. And
Thank
we'll
you,
move to
Commissioner.
our next.
Thank you all very much.
Okay,
And
we're
we'll
gonna.
move to our next and final item. Go ahead, Corey.
Couldn't have said it
Chair-
better myself. Item number 6, last time of the day.
Chair Carroll, I have to be recused from this item because on their board.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so Commissioner Chen is recused and will be leaving. Commissioner Bland is also recused on the next item and will not be present for this hearing item.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Item number 6, LPC 21-04144, an application for a binding report. The Borough of Manhattan, Block 1111, Lot 1, 1000 Fifth Avenue, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, individual and interior landmark. Those are some Roman-style museum building built in 1864 to 1965 and designed by Vox and Mold, R.M. Hunt, and McKim, Mead, and White, with later additions built between 1975 to 1990 and designed by Roche Dinkaloo. The application is to replace a
And commissioners, the applicants have joined the hearing. You now have control of the presentation. Remember to unmute yourself, state your name for the record, and you may begin.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. My name is Brett Guyard, and I'm the head of capital and infrastructure planning at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It's nice to be with you all virtually at the end of the day. I hope we give you an exciting presentation to finish off your day. I'm here to speak about the Met's ambition for our planned renovation of the Michael D. Rockefeller Wing, and then I'll hand it over to Michael Whetstone, principal at Buyer Blinder Bell, to present our architectural proposal. This wing was designed by Kevin Roche and built 40 years ago to house our Arts of Africa, Oceania, and the Americas collection, also known as AAOA. And while there have been some renovations over time, this will be the first significant renovation of the entire wing. And I'm not sure if you've walked by the south facade lately, but it's not looking so good. So we're very excited to get started on this project. We've been working for about 4 years, conceiving of its content and raising money, and now we're getting ready to implement it. And we hope to begin major construction in about a year. The goals of the project are both curatorial and infrastructural. The collection was gifted to the Met as primitive art, and it's long overdue for us to completely reevaluate its presentation by reimagining the collection into the 3 distinct regions that they are: the arts of Africa, the arts of Oceania, and the arts of the Americas. And we've engaged Y Architects as our exhibition designers to realize this work. But the care of the collection is as important as how we display it. And we want to conserve these objects with the same level of care that we do its neighbors in the Greek and Roman galleries or our European paintings collection. And so it's critical for us to be able to replace the aging infrastructure to meet the demands of a 21st century museum environment. And this includes a full replacement of the slope glazing on the south facade to control condensation, improve energy efficiency, control daylight for light sensitive objects on the inside, and also to protect birds in the park. And with that, I'll hand it off to Michael.
Thank you very much, Brett. And thank you, commissioners. I'm Michael Whetstone, principal at Buyer Blinder Bell Architects. And we'll get right into the presentation. Just starting to orient you where we are at the Met. In this aerial photograph, you can see Fifth Avenue at the bottom, and of course the park at the top and the sides, and the Rockefeller Wing is on the left, built in 1982. Just a little bit of historical context of why we're here. This plan is the 1970 master plan by Kevin Roos, John Dinklew and Associates. And you can see in pink the footprint of the building as it existed in the 1960s. You can see that the full Fifth Avenue facade by McKimmey and White and Richard Morris Hunt was there. And then there were older pieces at the rear, but the full footprint as originally envisioned in the master plan from the 19th century had not yet been fulfilled. So Roche and Dinklew proposed this master plan for all the new additions in yellow to the commission, and the commission approved this. And these were all built through the 1970s, 80s, and early 90s. And of course, you see the Temple of Dendur and the American wing on the north side, built in the 70s. And then the wings in the south were completed in the 80s and 90s, including the Rockefeller wing in 1982. So when we are coming to the commission to alter the Rockefeller wing, we are not proposing to alter the designated individual landmark. We are proposing to alter a modern addition that was previously approved as appropriate by this commission. So the scope that's before the commission is this curtain wall outlined in red that you see on the left, but better seen in the aerial photograph. So in this aerial photograph of the Met, with of course Fifth Avenue on the right and the park on the left, the south facade at the bottom, outlined in red is that enormous piece of sloped glass, 200 feet long and 60 feet tall, that encloses the exterior wall of the Rockefeller wing. And that's the part we are planning to replace. Just the context for the whole project, section and plan through the Rockefeller wing. In the floor plan, you can see 38,000 square foot square of galleries. Those are, as Brett said, the galleries of Arts of Africa, Oceania, and the Americas, which will be completely reinstalled. And then on the left, in the yellow line, and seen the diagonal line in the section, is the curtain wall, which we are proposing to replace. And the replacement of the curtain wall is entirely in support of the renovations of these particular galleries on the first floor. So just the context, this is the south elevation of the Met. You can see the McKimmey and White Wing K, the Greek and Roman collection on the right. On the left is the 1987 Lila Atchison Wallace wing, completed in 1987, housing modern and contemporary art. And then set in the middle, between the two limestone buildings, is the recessed glass wall of the Rockefeller wing. So just a little bit of historical context. This is a model from that 1970 master plan showing the original concept for this glass wall. It's recessed, sloped, and it's set between these two vertical limestone pieces symmetrically on the left and the right. This wall, unlike the wall of the Temple of Dendur, which is perhaps better known, which faces north, this wall faces south, and you can immediately begin to understand the problems of displaying artwork behind an enormous glass wall, just in terms of solar heat gain and the rays of the sun providing too much light. So Roche and Dinklew understood this in 1970, and you can see their original intent for the facade was to have a more reflective or translucent or opaque glass at the upper portion of the facade and a more transparent glass below. And then when they did the construction drawings in 1975, you can see below there were two kinds of glass which we differentiated, the more transparent one at the bottom and the more opaque one at the top. However, the curtain wall technology and glass technology was perhaps not quite up to the role of handling the situation, and there's been a lot of remediative efforts taken since. In this photograph from 1982 on the left, this is the wing when it was first built, and you can see that there are full height shades covering the windows with the sun beating its way through at the edges. These shades have been in place full height permanently since the day the building opened, because the sun and the heat was just too much for the more delicate wood and textile objects housed within. On the right is the way the galleries look right now, altered somewhat in 2005 with the extension of the second floor paintings galleries above. But you can still see those shades have been in place ever since. When that renovation was done in 2005, it was determined that the light levels were still too high, and a plastic film was placed on the exterior of the glass, which in the last few years, as you can see, has cracked and deteriorated. But the problems of this sloped glass wall are not just about the light levels and the plastic film. The curtain wall itself, with its 1980s technology, was never quite able to withstand and protect the museum environment from the outside, and particularly with the humidity and temperature levels that were required. After this building was built, the museum, and really museums worldwide, took on a standard of 70 degrees Fahrenheit temperature and 50% relative humidity year-round, which meant particularly in the winter, the high humidity levels touch a curtain wall that is kind of cold from the outdoor weather, and there's been a chronic problem of condensation and water dripping onto the floor and on the artwork. So for these reasons, with the corroded curtain wall that produces too much condensation and the inadequacy of the glass, the Met determined that in support of renovating these galleries, they should also replace the entire curtain wall glass and framing system. So the curtain wall, 200 feet long, 60 feet tall, will be replaced in conjunction and will be designed in conjunction with the renovations of these galleries. Sorry, the goals of the proposed glazing improvements are this greater resistance to condensation, greater resistance to thermal loss of heat during the winter, and of course the light levels both for solar gain and the controlling the light that is allowed to come in and touch the art objects. We'd like to improve the glass to the point where we could mostly eliminate having shades on the inside. And in addition to all those art conservation and energy goals, there's also the goal of providing bird-safe glass as a sloped, slightly reflective glass wall in the park. There are many fatal bird collisions, and this is something we can address with new glass technology. So the proposed removals are to remove the glazing system and the curtain wall framing. Everything else, the structure and the surrounding material stays intact. And we are proposing a couple of changes to the new sloped glazing, and I want to address these in detail, and these are the reasons that we are before the commission today. The first you can see is a change in the grid size that was built originally with a very small grid, pieces of glass only 2 foot 6 inches wide, 5 feet tall, and we're proposing, for a couple of reasons that I'll get into, to go to a larger grid, 3 foot 7 by 7 foot 6. But even though we are planning to replace the glass and change some of the details in the spacing, the overall concept of the sloped plane of glass will remain the same size and the same orientation. The details are proposed to change, but the basic idea of the glass wall set between these two limestone masses remains the same. So first, our new daylighting and glass scheme. We're working with the engineering firm Arup, their facade engineers and daylighting group, who specializes in museums. So we are proposing, somewhat similar to the way Roche did, to have the glass be different at the top and the bottom. In this case, there are 8 rows of glass. The bottom row of glass will be the most transparent, so you can see out to the park. And then as the glass goes higher on the facade, it becomes more and more opaque, less visible light transmittance going through. The effect on the inside would be that you could see out at the bottom. And remember, there have been shades in place the entire time, so no one's ever really been able to stand in these galleries and see out to the park. But about 9 feet above the floor, we switch to the second row of glass, which is slightly translucent, and it becomes less and less translucent as you go up. And we're able to do this with a laminated glass technology that wasn't available 40 years ago. A view from the inside on the left is what's existing now. We're changing the size of the grid for 2 reasons. Number one is that the curators wanted to have a less cluttered experience and to have that first row be higher than head height, so you could see out. And then the second reason is just in terms of efficiency. The glass panels are much more efficient than the framing, and so if there's less framing and more glass, it's a more efficient wall in terms of energy and condensation. We did want to have no shades at all. However, just based on the conservation requirements, during the summer months, when the light hours of light are the highest, we propose to deploy shades that come up from the bottom and they just cover the first row. This would just be for certain months, not there during the shoulder seasons or the winter, just to cut down overall light exposure of the artifacts. The shades will be able to go to the second row when the museum is closed, but would only be at the first row when it is open. You can see in this drawing here the difference in look between the shades being open and the shades being closed. But in all, without the shades, we think that the design of the galleries will be lighter with appropriately controlled light and more inviting, and with the connection to the outside that's not there now, as you can see in this concept rendering by Y of the new galleries. And of course, all the glass engineering is all done in conjunction with the precise objects that would be proposed in the galleries right near the glass. The next big change that we're proposing is a change to the glazing system. And this is being done entirely for reasons of technical performance, but does carry a big aesthetic change. And this is the other issue that we want to bring before the commission. At the top, you can see what is there now, a conventional 1980s curtain wall system. And it, of course, has the aluminum caps on the outside forming a grid. And it's the attachment of the outside cap with thousands and thousands of little metal screws and connections that go between the glass. That is actually one of the main forms of the cold bridges that form the condensation. It just compromises the thermal break between inside and outside too much. And this curtain wall was just inadequate to handle what was introduced later, which was that constant 50% humidity all winter long when the wall is tending to get kind of cold, form condensation, and then drip on the floor. So our proposed solution to this is a more advanced glass technology where the glass is held on entirely from the inside, from the warm side, and there's no metal protruding between the glass. So we have more of a continuous thermal break between outside and inside. So in this case, rather than an aluminum cap, you would get just a bead of sealant between the pieces of glass. You would still see the frame inside, but it's a more subtle form of articulation. The other details, of course, at the bottom of the wall and the coping and gutter at the top of the wall, and at the sides, we will maintain the profiles that are there now in the appearance, but with better insulated details. That's really just the glazing system and field on the inside that will change. Now, a little bit about the glass. We're proposing 2 layers of laminated glass in this triple glazed assembly. So the inner light laminated glass has the film that mostly handles the reduction of light levels as you go up the wall. And on the outside film is a fritted pattern. And the fritted pattern is there both to control light levels, but it also provides bird safety because birds read frits as a solid surface and tend not to fly right into it. Here are some samples of our glass. We do know that when the glass is tilted 20 degrees, as it will be in the building, and it is you're always looking up at it, you tend to see the reflection of the sky, no matter how opaque or transparent the glass is, similar to the way if you go out to the street and look at car windshields, you really get more sky than being able to see through. So there'll be kind of a uniform reflectivity no matter what. But we do note that the bird frits are actually a new requirement of the New York City Building Code as of 2021 for bird-friendly materials. So these frits or something like it would be required as of now in a glass building in New York City, no matter what. Staff had asked us to provide an example of the frits. The frits are quite visible up close. But when you back off far away, either the inside or the outside, they do become invisible. The example here is the renovation a few years ago of the Jacob Javits Convention Center. And you can see that from a distance, the frits dissolve into a slight haze or a frosted look to the glass, but are not individually visible until you get quite close up. And then a rendering of what we are proposing. This is the curtain wall as it looks right now with its grid. And the new glass technology as it would appear in the future. Just a couple of other views. This is the grid as it is now in context. And with the silicone joint. The silicone joint line actually does provide some detail, and in certain lights, it does pick up a light and reflection. I just wanted to point out the siting of the building. It is not actually the case that you are ever able to get right up close to the wall and stand right next to it. It is up a hill and 50 to 75 feet away from the path. You can see the path running south of the building in Central Park, the pedestrian path over here. So when people look at this facade, they're really looking at it usually through a screen of trees where it really forms a background. And therefore, I think perhaps will not be, a change would not be visible to that many people. Here's a view from Fifth Avenue. You can see that the glass curtain wall right over the parking garage entrance is 200 feet away and seen extremely obliquely from Fifth Avenue. One question the staff had for us is, can one look at this Rockefeller sloped curtain wall at the same time as some of the other great walls of glass that appear in the other Roche-Dinkeloo additions. This is a view of the southwest corner of the building. And because of the vastness of the building, particularly this modern art wing, which is 200 feet by 200 feet and has high limestone walls, it really is not the case that you can at the same time look at the glass wall of the Petrie Court and the Rockefeller wing. You'd have to walk 300 or 400 feet to see one from the other. So we think that this Rockefeller curtain wall does really stand on its own in terms of its visual impact at the same time as the other additions. And this is an addition showing the curtain wall in the context of the modern wing. The modern wing is in the foreground. This shrubbery that you see at the top is actually the parapet around the rooftop sculpture garden. And you can see a little bit of this glass at the same time as the Rockefeller curtain wall. But in the rendering, I think it's rather a subtle difference from one to the other. So I'm coming to the last two slides, so thank you for all your attention. I just wanted to first show a precedent at the Met for this kind of skylight. This is the ongoing replacement of the skylights over the European paintings galleries on the west side of the museum. This project was approved at a staff level by the Commission in 2017. These are the roofs over the oldest wings of the Met, but the facades are all hidden by the later additions by Roche-Dinkeloo. So this 350-foot long glass slope facing the park was actually has had several renditions of skylights over its 140-year history. The latest one, which is being constructed now, is the same system that we were proposing for the Rockefeller wing. So you can see the same kind of skylight overlooking Central Park on the same building as the Rockefeller wing. And I just wanted to end going back to Roche-Dinkeloo's early vision. In this 1970 master plan model, you can see that they don't actually show the individual curtain wall grids. They just show this abstract single slope of glass, kind of a very expansive and optimistic and progressive vision of the future of the Met. And the columns are shown here, but this is without, if you will, the clutter of what was available for 1980s curtain wall technology when it was finally built a few years later. So I'd just like to suggest in closing that this original architect's conception of a sloped glass wall is very much in keeping with what we are currently proposing. So thank you, and we welcome, of course, questions and comments.
All right, thank you very much. We do have some questions. Commissioner Goldblum, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Couple of questions. First of all, I think in the renderings it was visible, correct me if I'm wrong, that the inner layer, which is going to be creating the shading, will be visible to the exterior from the distances at which one can see this. So you will see like kind of a three-tiered, three-banded arrangement. Is that a fair thing to say?
Yes, it is. You will be able to see in a very subtle way the changes in glass as it goes up. And as I said, we think that's in keeping with somewhat with the original vision here.
Okay. Was there any discussion in the resolution to approve this addition of the mullions, either of their scale or of their relationship with the existing building? Was there any commentary at all about that design?
I do not know the answer to that question.
Does the staff?
Corey, I don't know if you can speak for the staff.
I believe if Emma Waterloo is here, she read the older reports very closely and had noted that there were some dissenting opinions about the design to begin with, but I'm not sure they got specific about the grid of the mullions themselves. But if she's here, she may be able to add to that.
Hi, Emma Waterloo, preservation staff. No, it did not get into the fine-grained details of the design of the mullions in our records in terms of the advisory report from the 70s.
Last question. Is it your understanding of the Met's intention to apply this design to the other side, to the north side, or to other areas where one has a similar grid?
Absolutely. So if I can just skip ahead into the appendix, if I might. So this question, of course, did come up, and of course the Temple of Dendra wing, particularly, is symmetrical to this wing. Built a few years earlier, they are architecturally identical, except that the Temple of Dendra faces north, and the Sackler wing faces south. So the condition of this curtain wall is that in terms of the light problems and the sunlight, it is very different. This faces north, and it can have clear glass. But in terms of the energy efficiency and the condensation, the problems are exactly the same. And in fact, this curtain wall is facing corrosion damage as well. And so the Met does not have any current funding or schedule or plans to replace this. But if it ever came to that at some point in the future, the intent for right now would be actually to do a similar treatment. It would not be exactly the same because this glass doesn't have the same sun problems. But in terms of the framing system and the efficiency that we're looking for, the intent is that eventually it could be the same. But again, not part of this application and not currently scheduled.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Devonshire, you go next, please.
Thanks, Sarah. Two sort of technical questions. One, what is the performance life of the sealant that you intend to use on the exterior? And two, what provisions have been discussed about cleaning what will be inevitable atmospheric adhesion of soiling?
Absolutely. Let me go back to the our rendering. So in terms of, I did some research on the silicone glaze system. It's actually been around since the 70s, and it first came into popular use in the early 80s, just really after this building was built. And in fact, Roche Dinkeloo adopted this kind of glazing themselves in the later career. And the white paper that I did read from the industry is that that this kind of glazing is expected to last 40 or 50 years. So that's in terms of that. And then the other point I think it's important to make is that the glass with the mullion caps, it really becomes a big problem with dirt. I'm going to go to another rendering.
As does
Yes. So in this case, because the mullion caps are on a slope, the top surface tends to catch a lot of dirt and a lot of snow, and it's a particular vulnerable point for water and for dirt. And so this is one reason this is not particularly great shape. And the thing about silicone joints is that they are smoother, they don't catch as much dirt, and because they are all very, very visible, they're easily able to, you can see problems and you can go and maintain them. So, but we think that this wall will be actually, because of the big problems with debris and dirt with the projecting mullion caps, that this wall will be cleaner and easier to maintain.
Okay, next we'll go to Commissioner Chapin. Please go ahead. Oops. Commissioner Chapin, did you have a question?
Yes, sorry, was muted.
Okay.
Yeah, I was wondering what the period that you thought the shades might have to be deployed was. You mentioned, I think, something about the fall, but have you got a...
Sure. Yeah. So the intent of the light conservation levels is the annual hours of light levels that the art object receive. So during when in the summer, when the days are longer and the hours of sunlight are longer, the idea is to have the shades deployed during those warmer months during the summer, and to have them retracted during the fall and spring and winter months.
Okay,
and Mike, just to add to that, one advantage
Sure,
that we have is that the museum doesn't open until 10 a.m. And so we're going to keep the shades deployed when the museum is closed to the public to limit the annual lux hours on the objects on the interior, and then hopefully be able to open them as much as possible when we are open to the public.
Thank you.
Okay, and Commissioner Devonshire has more questions.
Sorry, just one more about the sealant. I presume the staff has been involved in discussions about what color the sealant will be. Is this, can you?
Yeah. In fact, I'm going to skip ahead to a photograph that we have in our appendix. Well, just bear with me for one moment.
It's an important component here.
Yes, exactly. So this is another construction photo of the European painting skylights, which were approved by the commission and are currently being constructed. So we actually have, and I think we proposed the same, it's kind of a champagne colored sealant. And you can see that what's great about glass walls is they are infinitely variable in terms of their look because of different conditions of light and viewpoint. So when catching the sun, you can see it's quite light and it creates a little bit of a detail. And other times of day, it could be a little bit dark. But we are, I think, proposing to use the same kind of a sealant color because of its visual characteristics as we have done at the skylights at European paintings.
Cool, thanks.
Any other questions? Yes, Commissioner Shamir Baron, please go ahead.
Thanks. More about the sealant. Is it sticky?
No, it is actually quite smooth to the touch when it's dried and healed.
Does it get sticky?
I don't believe it does. I mean, it is a very sort of durable material. It's pliable. It needs to be soft to cover expansion, but I think it is not sticky to the touch.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, I think that's it for our questions for right now. So why don't we move to public testimony? And if you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And we will, as always, start with anyone who signed up in advance. And I'll turn it over to Anthony Fabre to take us through the testimony.
Thank you, Sarah. We do have a few people who signed up to speak. The first person I'm going to bring in is Mark Diller. Let's see. I actually don't see that he's in. Oh, here he is. He hasn't raised his hand, but I'll bring him in. Mark, you're now in the meeting.
Thanks very much, but this is Mark Diller from Community Board 7. Michelle Parker, the co-chair of our Preservation Committee, will be presenting our resolution. That's why I didn't raise my hand. But
okay, yeah, I can just bring her in.
Thank you for the courtesy.
Right. Okay, no problem. So I'll bring in Michelle instead. Okay, Michelle, you are in the meeting now.
Thank you. Good afternoon. You can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Michelle Parker. I'm a CB7 board member, as well as the co-chair of the Preservation Committee. Thanks to the Met for including us in the discussion of their application. Our board approved this application unanimously, 41-0-0-0. And we decided, our resolution says that this application is thoroughly appropriate to the character of the individual landmark and sensitive and differential to the original Roche and Dinkerloo master plan. We can't wait till this work is finished so we can all head back to the museum. Thank you.
Thank you. So up next, I'm going to bring in, let's see. So I'll bring in, I had Lara on my list, but I don't see her here.
Maybe Friends of the Upper East Side.
I think it's probably, yeah, that's what it was. Thank you. Okay, so Lara, you are now in the meeting.
Hi, can I be heard?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right.
We can see you as well now.
So I'm Laura Variali, representing Friends of the Upper East Side Historic Districts. Chair Carroll and honorable commissioners. As an individual and interior landmark located within a scenic landmark, the Metropolitan Museum of Art is a very beloved institution on the Upper East Side and in New York City. Friends understand the need for a highly controlled environment with set humidity levels and temperature, which can be more easily achieved with technological improved and efficient glazing. Friends Preservation Committee does not oppose the replacement of the curtain wall located at the Rockefeller wing of the Met. We believe that while the proposed framing will diminish the texture of the sloped glazed wall, the pattern is still visible and will not read as a large single pane of glass. The greater transparency of the glass, while not present on the existing wall, will provide much needed light control and relates to Roche Dinkeloo's original proposal for the Rockefeller wing. The proposed alteration is necessary for the proper functioning of this beloved institution and will not detract from the character of the museum. We are, however, slightly concerned that the Metropolitan Museum of Art has not come up with a master plan for the replacement of all glazed walls. We kindly ask that the stewards of the institution, as well as the commissioners, keep in mind the visual consistency of the building when proposing and approving future alterations. Finally, Friends would like to commend Buyer Blender Bell, our architects, for such a thorough and well-delivered presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And next, I will bring in Eamon Roche. Okay, Eamon, you should be in the meeting. You just have to unmute yourself.
There we go. All set?
Yes, we can hear and see you.
Very good. Thank you. And thank you, Michael, for that great presentation. Again, my name is Eamon Roche, and I'm speaking on behalf of Kevin Roche, John Dinkeloo and Associates about this proposed reglazing. And of course, we acknowledge the stated need for improved thermal and solar performance at the Rockefeller wing. However, I would say that we respectfully find the aesthetics resulting from the proposal to be a bit of a loss. And let me just quickly review. There are three principal design elements at play in this proposal, and we feel that at least two of them could be handled differently to ensure the architectural result was both better and more historically in keeping with the original design. So those elements are, of course, the nature of the glazing, if it's captured or structurally glazed, the unit sizes of the glazing, the existing roughly 2.5 foot wide by 5 foot high grid, or the proposed roughly 3.5 foot wide by 7.5 foot high grid. And then lastly, the transparency or the translucency of the glazing. We do feel that the pronounced gridding and texture created by the existing captured system with the exterior pressure caps is much more than just a way to hold the glazing units in place. The lattice created by the caps defines a very considered scale and sets the planes of the glazing in a precisely calibrated contrast to the almost featureless monoliths of limestone that bookend it. However, the gridding potential of the proposed structurally glazed curtain wall is really limited on the exterior to the visual impact of the sealant joint. And I think that the result appears underwhelming in that regard. Therefore, we would suggest that the captured glazing continue to be considered as part of the new scheme. In terms of the sizes of the glass units, we find that the proposed larger grid is less appealing in its scale. We note that the scale of the existing grid was originally arrived at not just for its interplay with the exterior elements, but just as importantly for the experience of the museum visitor. And the gridded glass in that sense is both a series of windows and also elegantly and insistently a kind of beautiful boundary. The idea, well realized in our opinion, was to find the perfect delineation between inside and outside. Lastly, we come to the subject of the transparency or the translucency of the glass. And on a practical level, we can see why the large expanses of the Rockefeller wing curtain wall are best treated at the glazing layer. We do worry that the resultant opacity would only add to a retrenchment from the museum's connection to the park that at one time, with our firm's oversight, had even included direct entrances at the locations of many of the new wings. It is worth recalling architectural critic Paul Goldberger's conjecture when first reviewing our firm's master plans for these wings that, quote, "The imagery of the buildings themselves is clearly Crystal Palace, an appropriate one considering the desire to emphasize a park relationship," end quote. That's Paul Goldberger writing in Architectural Forum, March 1974. We find that the current proposal will scrub this historical allusion to the detriment of the museum-park relationship it serves so well. However, unlike our recommendations to retain certain aspects of the existing design, we do not have a proposal to improve upon BBB's solar and thermal control solution in this regard, except to suggest that if the existing grid scale were to be maintained, then it should be investigated whether the bottom 2 rows of glazing could remain vision glass. While a loss, we concede that for all but the lowest 2 rows of glazing, some version of translucency replacing transparency is warranted. All the more reason then to preserve the captured glazing and size of the existing curtain wall in any future design. Finally, we are confident that the future Temple of Dender curtain wall renovations can maintain the existing 3-fold scheme of captured glass, fully transparent and unitized at the present scale, given that this wing is both north-facing and endowed with artifacts that are largely impervious to UV degradation. Beyer Blinder Bell is a very fine firm, and we hope that they, along with the commission and the museum, will take our suggestions as our sincere desire to see the best possible outcome for these renovations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, I will bring in John Arbuckle. Okay, John, you should be in the meeting. You just have to unmute yourself and turn on your camera.
Temple of Dender curtain wall renovations.
Okay, you see me now?
Yes.
Great. All right. Hello, I'm John Arbuckle, president of DOCOMOMO US New York Tri-State, a local chapter of an international organization working in over 65 countries around the world to identify, document, and protect building sites and neighborhoods of the modern movement. We would like to thank the Metropolitan Museum and Beyer Blinder Bell for presenting their proposed replacement of the sloped glazing of the Rockefeller Wing to representatives of our chapter and of DOCOMOMO US on February 3rd. The many expansions and renovations that Kevin Roche, John Dinkloo, and Associates designed at the Metropolitan Museum have become an integral part of its identity, which merit preserving as much as the earlier portions of the complex designed by Richard Morris Hunt, McKim, Mead and White, and others. Many New Yorkers are shocked when they learn that the now iconic front entry stair on Fifth Avenue is not at least 100 years old, but it was actually designed by Roche Dinkloo, constructed in 1970. We understand the need to replace the present sloped glass wall, and we believe the Met wishes to be a good steward of this significant modern portion of its complex. This proposal has been carefully considered, but we believe it falls short in one important aspect. The exterior of the proposed glazing replacement will differ greatly in appearance from the present glazing system, reading much more as one single flat plane of uninterrupted glass. The exterior muntin caps of the present original system protrude from the surface of the glass, adding depth, casting shadows, and clearly articulating the individual glazing units. While we understand that the proposed system utilizing structural glazing is technologically superior, we regret that its exterior appearance would be so different than that of the present system. We understand the decision to replace most of the present transparent glass with translucent glass, but fear that will only further reduce the extent to which each glazing unit is perceived from the exterior as an individual element. The 19th century greenhouse was an explicit design inspiration to Roche Dinkloo, deemed especially appropriate to the location within Central Park. Rather than recalling the 19th century, the planar system proposed would appear more contemporary than its predecessor, very much a product of the 21st century. We hope that the Met, drawing upon the expertise of its impressive team of consultants, can develop an alternative solution that offers the benefits of current technology while providing greater articulation of the glazing units, at least in the vertical direction, so as to maintain more of the original design intent. Thank you.
Thank you. So next up, I will bring in Mark Bench. Mark, you should be in the meeting.
Thank you, Anthony, and good afternoon for the final time this afternoon. This is Mark Bench on behalf of the Victorian Society, New York. The Metropolitan Museum individual landmark exists within and is part of the Central Park Scenic Landmark, and therefore proposed alterations to the museum must be reviewed not only for their relationship to the museum building, but also for their effects on the scenic landmark. In fact, much of the discussion of the late 20th century additions to the museum, we recall, were focused on their efforts on the park. The curtain wall of this wing, consisting of relatively small panes, small glass panes with a grid of raised muntins, was intended to recall the texture of greenhouses, which were often features of romantic style parks, including Central Park. Roche Dinkeloo described the museum master plan as, and I quote, an architecture more like the kind of building one would expect to find in a park, such as a greenhouse in a botanical garden. The inevitable result is a striking transition between the classical and the garden architecture. The precedent for this exists in the Botanical Garden on the Mall in Washington, D.C., where the formal masonry building is attached to a glass greenhouse, end of quotation. The Rockefeller wing of the museum could not be confused with a historic greenhouse, but we think the texture of the curtain wall serves to soften the effect of the facade when seen through the landscape. We are concerned that the larger butt-joined panes with no raised muntins proposed for the new wall would present a texture-free sheer glass wall. By its contrast, would be a more intrusive feature in the landscape. It is not the garden architecture envisaged by Roche Dinkeloo. In a different context, the effect of the change in glazing on the relationship between the newer and older museums wings might be less problematic. Here, however, the relationship is critical to the appropriateness of the building, both to the scenic landmark and to the building's own internal consistency as a type, a formal masonry building attached to a glass greenhouse. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. We do have 2 more signups. Up next, I'm going to bring in Kelly Carroll. Okay, Kelly, you should be in the meeting.
Kelly Carroll, Historic Districts Council. HDC appreciates the applicant's acknowledgement of the precedent the C of A will have on the Temple of Denver in the future. This consideration demonstrates a thoughtful responsibility for the long term, and it is appreciated. With regard to the Rockefeller wing, HDC understands the benefits that the new curtain wall will provide. Like most evolved technology, however, there is a resulting visual loss or change. Here, that means no more protruding mullions or framing members. Our committee resolved that there is an aesthetic value in the gridded conservatory quality of the existing system, and that this intervention will render it dimensionally muted. In order to preserve a legibility of robustly expressed framing, we suggest applying mullion caps to the vertical articulation. We believe the emphasis of the vertical elements and suppression of the horizontal ones will result in a harmonious composition that makes technical sense, as well as we heard about how the horizontal elements collect dirt and snow and water. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have Sean Corsandi, who I will now bring in. Sean, you should be in the meeting now.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Sean Corsandi for Landmark West. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee is grateful to have this opportunity to speak on this item, which resides in CB7, as the entirety of Central Park lies within our district boundary. When Kevin Roche, John Dinkeloo, and Associates, KRJDA, began their work at the Met in 1967, their quote, master plan proposed an architecture of glass roofs and walls which would allow the maximum penetration of daylight and develop an appropriate character for its presence in a park. 54 years later, while the allusions to the greenhouse in the park remain, the intent of maximum penetration of daylight poses an existential threat to the very longevity of the collection housed within and modern museum standards. KRJDA's innovations with glass precedes them, from their experiments with the first use of neoprene gasketing in curtain walls in 1949 to 54 for Warren, Michigan's General Motors Technical Center, to the world's thinnest curtain wall at 5/16 of an inch for the 1958 IBM Rochester plant in Minnesota, and the world's largest mirror, pushing the limits of mirror coatings for the 1962 Bell Labs in Holmdel, New Jersey, all by predecessor firm Aero Saarinen and Associates. It's not a stretch to imagine that if better technology existed, the firm would have used it, or better yet, pushed industry to create something even smarter once again. And herein lies our concern. Honoring the designer's intent suggests that each wing would be sheathed in the latest technology available at the time of reglazing. The overall landmark, however, is literally enshrouded, like the many relics and artworks within, in its own glass vitrine. And this should have consistency to rationalize the Vox, Mould, Hunt, McKim, Mead, and White work that it completes. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee is in support of this proposal, but also requests consideration for a comprehensive master plan for the glazed pylons at the Dender and Lehman wings, which both announce and guard the original individual landmark site. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are all the signups we have, and there are no other people with their hands raised. So I think we're good on live testimony.
Thank you, Anthony. And Rich, do we have any additional written testimony?
We did receive a resolution from Manhattan Community Board 8 recommending approval.
Okay, all right, thank you. So I'd like to turn back to Michael and Brett now and see if you'd like to respond to the comments we've heard.
Sure, thank you. I'd like to make a few comments. First, the first speaker, Mr. Roche, I first want to express from Barber Bell, of course, our greatest respect for your firm and all of your work at the Metropolitan Museum, which we are getting more and more familiar with. And of course, it was our intent from the beginning to treat this as a landmark quality building and respect and keep intact the architectural vision expressed therein. Just address some of the more specific comments. We certainly did look at if it was possible to have more transparent glass, for example, to have 2 rows rather than 1. And we found with our light analysis that was just simply too much light coming in. And we would just note that there have been interior shades up for the full height for the entire life of the building. And the opportunity to see out for 1 row without the shades is really something that's new. And I think that changing more glass to transparent would just in the end mean that we would have to have shades up all the time. That's just sort of the fact of the southern exposure. And as regards the caps, and a few commenters talked about the mullion caps and their loss, I think this is a situation where it's really just not an aesthetic choice. This is something where the form and the appearance of the curtain wall just can't be separated from the functional system. And in this case, having better thermal breaks for such a large area of glass, I think for a building that's a conventional commercial or residential building, or a building that has smaller areas of glass in relationship to the exterior, I think making this an aesthetic decision is possible. But just for the extreme size of this glass and the percentage of the exterior that it takes over, the efficiencies really can't be reached if we are putting metal on the outside and compromising that thermal break. And then there were just a few comments about the Roche's idea that this was similar to a 19th century conservatory, and I think that is that is true. But I wonder how literal that statement really is. I think that the silicone joints that you see are not invisible. They do, as I showed in the photograph of the currently constructed skylights, they do have some depth and they do reflect light in certain ways. And I think there is still a grid expressed and there is some 3-dimensionality, but it's much less. And I think that what we saw in some of those original master plan images is an idea of not literally reproducing a 19th century conservatory, but coming up with a futuristic and expansive and kind of generous interpretation for the future of that kind of architecture. So I think we are in keeping with the 19th century conservatory idea, but with this idea that it's being updated. And then the last comment I think was about the master plan. Again, we were not able to come up with a master plan because the Met doesn't know the schedule or the funding or when any of those could happen. But it would certainly be least our intent if we were to work on these projects to engage towards some consistency if there were future projects. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And we have some more questions. Commissioner Shamir Baran, please go ahead.
Thanks. I'm wondering if you've explored and if it's worthwhile, that is, if the technology is makes it possible today yet to use sort of transitional films or electrochromic dynamic glass that's actually responsive, more responsive to light contexts, and whether or not that technology would serve this kind of situation, and whether or not it's advanced enough to be considered.
You know, we have asked that question. We have explored that with Arup, and I think that we found is that the kind of color rendering that Arup would love to get on the inside of the building, so they can really control to make sure that there aren't any colored tints in the changing kind of electrochromic glass. That technology is not quite advanced enough to make this work, but it is certainly a question that we explored.
Mike, I'll just add to that we also we looked at a few different types of technology for that, and the Met also had concerns about long-term maintenance and repair of those units over time. You know, we get to these renovations once in multiple generations, and so our concern was if we picked such a bespoke technology right now at its infancy, that we would run into problems later on with replacements and maintenance.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson, please go ahead. So just hit unmute.
Did you think of using a hybrid system, perhaps silicone joint with captured glass, just to get a bit of a shadow line? Or I'm not sure I've ever seen it, but was that possible?
Perhaps it is possible. I think what we came to the commission with is kind of the most efficient, best system for the needs of the Met.
Right, but this is an aesthetic question I'm asking. If the 1/8-inch reveal of the shadow line was important or not. So that's the question I'm asking. So you say
right,
the efficiency governs the aesthetic that I'm hearing. And so I'm asking if there was a hybrid of that.
Yeah, so we did explore. If there were a hybrid, then we would end up, I think, putting on ornamental mullion caps. We would still want to use the silicone glazing, and I think if they were ornamental, then they would just end up compromising the efficiency, but not really serving a function. So it would be kind of spending more for a less efficient glass wall.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, I'm going to start unmuting everyone so that we can make a motion to close the hearing and move to our discussion. So Commissioner Holford-Smith, would you make a motion to close the hearing? Oh, Commissioner Holford-Smith? Can't hear you. I'll go to, while you figure that out, I'll go to Commissioner Gustafson. Would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
All right. And Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
Okay, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And you know, I think this is a very interesting project, and I think we'll have an interesting discussion. And I think it's interesting because, you know, the Met is an important cultural educational institution in our city, also a landmark, is important for both its architecture and really for its mission as well. And so the proposal is to change this curtain wall both to address, you know, the needs and the protection of the collections inside, as well as, you know, sort of trying to address the aesthetic concerns. And so, and then also thinking about the original Roche includes the firm's original intent and speculating on that. We've heard a little bit about that, and also thinking about whether they would have used the best technology available and how that factors into the discussion on both the quality of protection to the interior and the collections, as well as the quality of the aesthetics. So I think this is going to be an interesting discussion, and why don't we go ahead, Commissioner Goldblum, would you like to start?
Sure, thank you. Well, it was a very thorough and careful presentation, but I think that the thing that was interesting for me was the consistency in the comments from the public about it that raised questions for me that I think that the presentation did not answer. I think that if the initial concept of the additions was to create a relationship between the existing building and the new, of like a greenhouse or a solarium, orangery kind of arrangement, I think that that's an interesting and compelling and logical relationship to me. I would understand that. If that was the initial intent, I think there's something to be said for the arguments that have been made in the testimony about the need for more texture. I think that without looking at a facade showing the existing building next to the proposed, it's hard for me to really see if there's a scale relationship between the grid that's current, the old grid, and the existing building that was intentional. I can't really see if that was the case. My guess is that it wasn't, but and therefore I don't think the scale change per se is inappropriate of the grid. But I would say that that the applicant should explore that if there is a relationship in the existing design between the existing building and the grid, and see if their proposal does anything to alter that relationship. I think also in terms of the technical argument, I am not a facade engineer or a facade designer, but we have seen at the commission examples of fully thermally broken contemporary facades where the tube that's behind has like a fin that goes through the glass that's either thermally broken in its connection to the tube or not, and that the glass really just sits completely independent, just like this glass sits on top of a silicone cushion, isolating it from the metal, where you retain the articulation that the metal affords, while having an up-to-date and contemporary facade. It's certainly true that if the intention was to create an orangery, if you look at Paxton's work, the emphasis on verticality is definitely there. And I think it would be an appropriate thing to consider having those either mullion caps or fins or whatever to be expressed vertically, as several people in the testimony offered. I think that would give the project the scale and the relationship to the greenhouse addition that was intended, if that was what was intended. But I think that can be established by doing some research. Step one. Step two, I think that the need for differential shading is very clear, and I certainly wouldn't seek to object to that. However, what I do object to is a striped appearance. And I think that to the extent that it is visible, and it's certainly visible in the rendering, and we don't know if it'll be more visible or less so in real life, but it would make sense that it would be, I think that that's a mistake. I think that the intention of the original architect and the existing structure as it was built had a monolithic quality with the exception of the bottom band. So I think that monolithic quality is essential to the design intent. So I would suggest that they achieve that by either grading the frit, having the frit do more of the job to darken in a gradation that goes from light to dense, or to have the interlayer, which is being used for the shading, to do it via a gradation and instead of via a step. And that way you preserve the monolithic quality without having a striped appearance. And I think that's it.
Sorry, excuse me, I was muted. Okay, well, next we'll go to Commissioner Devonshire.
Thanks, Sarah. I have some of the same misgivings that Commissioner Goldblum has about the change from that relationship of the glass to the masonry masses being an orangerie in effect. I would presume that a firm like BBB has done that research, and I only imagine that there have been discussions with staff, and it was determined that that wasn't necessary. But if that's not the case, I agree with him that there should be some research done and discussions about a relationship with that original intent. The other thing that gives me a little bit of pause, again, I mentioned the sealant before. I have not seen a situation in which silicone sealant has been used on a building, and you see it a lot in Soho, where it's been used on cast iron buildings, where in the initial curing of the sealant there was not some attraction, because it is sticky in the beginning. There's a attraction of atmospheric contaminants, and then subsequent to that there are electrostatic attraction to even more contaminants, and you end up with joints that are the color of soot. And certainly in New York City, that's an issue. And I can only imagine that that's going to happen on this, and it's not going to happen in a uniform fashion. It's going to be sort of an area here, an area there, where there's sort of microclimates that are getting washed and not. And so I see a massive maintenance issue using that system that I think could become aesthetically problematic if there isn't now a routine maintenance schedule set up to clean this thing. And so it gives me a bit of pause. Anyway, enough gas bag.
All right, thank you. All right, and so Commissioner Jefferson?
The joint is important in this project because once you change the grid, you change the aesthetic. We all know that. So I would say that's an issue. The aesthetic issue of the silicone without, let me step back. The silicone is a modern material, and it works very well. It has we've used it before, and it works, it's clean, and it's handsome. The issue here, I think, is not the technical, it's more aesthetic. What do we want to see this thing look like in relationship to the previous architect? So my concern is that if the proportions were changed, if the grid was adjusted, maybe the silicone joints would work. I mean, over time, they're going to get dirty, yes. They will need to be clean, yes. But it's a material that I think has a life, I've been told, 25, 35 years. So I think I can approve the silicone. I just have to be concerned about the joints and about the film on the inside. There's something that's not resolved yet for me, but I can't pinpoint.
Okay. Great, thank you. Commissioner Gustafson?
Yeah, I'll be brief. I'm not as worked up about this as my fellow commissioners. However, I guess I've been made aware of the striped appearance that I hadn't really picked up on in the in initial viewing, and the point that was made about texture, I think, is also important. So I'll go along with my fellow commissioners on those points.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Yes, thanks. I agree with so much of what's been said. Commissioner Goldblum's point about the kind of more, the changes in the in the fritting in order to create a more transitional kind of experience that's non-striped. Commissioner Devonshire's point about the really what the sealant becomes and how it quickly turns into something that was not originally planned. You know, whether it has to do with color, it has to do with the consistency, it has to do with whatever it is, that stickiness aspect. But I'm struck, I'm trying to figure out this other thing. I mean, I'm looking at page 29, keep toggling between page 29 and page 30, page 29 and page 30. And I'm like amazed by how different those two realities are, even though it's so, you know, so subtle. Both the dimensional change of the panels is relatively subtle. I mean, in the scope, in the scheme of things, the kind of the texture of the kind of the monolithic quality, as Commissioner Goldblum was talking about, has changed. One is monolithic in one sense, and the other is monolithic in another sense. And I'm trying to make sense of it and trying to figure out if these are the same, if these are kind of progressions one of the other, if they are kind of historically sort of progressing. Meaning, to the question that you had posed, Chair Carroll, about this issue of, you know, would they have had Roche had this opportunity and this kind of technology, might they have gone for this? In other words, is it the kind of the natural progression of their own intention? And I'm kind of thinking in terms of the image, yes, I think it is the natural progression of their own intention, as demented a kind of concept as that is. So, and yet I still am sort of troubled by some of those other more technical issues having to do with the reality of the sealant and the reality of the striping versus the kind of more transitional grading. So I think that's where I'm at, that I can accept the changes because they are in line and aligned with something having to do with the original, even though there is dramatic change in it, because style is just that way. A pair of shoes you bought 3 years ago you haven't worn them in 3 years, you look at them 3 years later and they're unwearable. So it's just like, but I think that those other issues do need to get resolved.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Holford-Smith?
This is really interesting. I think it all goes back to the intent, the original intent, which I think we don't necessarily know yet. And maybe that does require some more research. But if the intent, as previous commissioners have said, was for this to be really to read as a greenhouse of a sort of fine scale, then changing the scale of the glass and eliminating the mullions, you know, is something that we should not be doing. I understand it's, you know, technologically it's better, and it's what, you know, my office tends to do. And, you know, it would be the way, you know, sort of a new building would be built. But the question is, you know, was the original intent to make it look like a fine scaled conservatory? So I'm a little concerned about making a decision without having that information. I do think that the stripe appearance, as Commissioner Goldblum pointed out, is disturbing. And I was thinking to myself about maybe having the frit or the interlayer sort of graduate and whether that would be imperceptible over such a large expanse. I do think that, as in testimony has suggested, that there could be a sort of middle ground between the structurally captured glass and the expression of a mullion by having sort of a cap at the, or a fin or a cap at the vertical. There might be some compromise that might maintain the weather, the weather barrier, and not have the thermal transmission from outside to inside. So I think those are some of my comments.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chapin?
I'm going to come at this from a little bit different perspective, which is what the original architects had been faced with the problems that have occurred, and we're fully aware of them, and had this, technology, this the glass to deal with. Would they have considered something more like this than they would have than what they did at the time? And I think they would. I think they would have, used the best solution at hand to deal with the issues of light intrusion and moisture. At the same time, the sort of, and this is always during times when you don't have a shade that has to be down all the time, which obviously completely sort of destroyed their original concept in some ways by having, ending up with a situation where the light intrusion forced the shade to be down all the time. There always was going to be some difference at the bottom. If you had the lighted the clear glass portion at the bottom. So there was always going to be maybe it wasn't necessarily going to be a solid presentation, but this triple presentation may be a little troubling. Yes, if there's some way to deal with that. And that's the slide is shown now is particularly highlighting that. But I think the larger panels and the approach that they're doing is the right thing to do. And I think that the architects who created this originally would have gone in that direction if they had been aware of what the problems that were going to occur as the result of how this was constructed. And also then you've got the bird issue, which was not an issue at that time. So I think we have to take some account of all of those things in looking at the project. In general, I think they're taking the right approach. Perhaps some further mitigation can be done to try to deal with the appearance of kind of the triple sections. That's fine. Okay.
All right. Good. Thank you. Thank you all for your comments. And, and I just thank Diana for sort of summing up your comments, because I do think that, as I said in the beginning, there's the question of the original intent. There's the sort of aesthetic or design question. And then there are the technical requirements for inside temperature and humidity control, which I think is as important a factor for us to consider, given that this museum is a landmark as a museum, and understanding that the collections are part of their part of the continuation of their mission as a museum. And so I think that considering those needs is appropriate, and we should do that. But I do think, and as Commissioner Shamir Barron said, I think each of these changes is subtle, but maybe it's sort of the combination of them that are still giving people some pause. The change in the size of the panels, the silicone versus some sort of fin or something that would have a profile, and then also versus the striped pattern on it. So I think each of them together is very subtle, but maybe together there's something that is just not hitting the mark for all the commissioners. And so I think with a little more information and research on some of these aspects would help inform this discussion a little bit more and help us move toward an action. So what I'd like to do is take a no action today and ask the applicants to come back and think about those three elements. If there is anything you can do without sacrificing the technical requirements and needs, to sort of refine each of those elements or each of those aspects in a way that would maybe relate more to the existing or maintain a relationship between the existing glass and the masonry, as was discussed. So let's take no action and let's regroup and have you back as soon as you're ready. Okay?
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you. And that concludes our day. So again, thank you, commissioners, for all of your dedication and commitment. And Michael, your hand is raised. Is that a new question or comment you wanted to add?
I had a question for Michael, Devonshire, or Ann. If you were to sand this, I've heard you can sand silicone joints, like put a sand coating on them when they're still sticky. Would that make a difference to the dirt, to the soiling?
It might make it worse.
Worse.
You can paint it, but paint will last on a silicone joint for about 3 years. And that would be a nightmare situation here too.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, when we typically do butt glazed joints, we do black silicone just because it's going to turn black anyway, and that way it's uniform.
Yeah.
But you can also capture the glass in a frame that's structurally glazed, so you have a little bit of a frame. That's an option. I'm not sure about the thermal transmission of that, but it looks more like the Javits Center.
Right.
Right. Okay. So we can get a little bit more information on all of that. So again, thank you all for another great, interesting day and for all of your dedication to our process. Thank you. And that concludes